Welcome back, my friend. Before we begin tonight's story, take a moment to settle into the most comfortable position you can find. Adjust your pillow, relax your shoulders, unclench your jaw, and allow your body to slowly sink into the surface beneath you. Now take a long, slow breath in through your nose. Hold it for a moment and gently breathe out. Feel the day beginning to drift away. As you're getting comfortable, I'd love to know, what time is it where you are right now, and where in the world are you listening from tonight? Whether you're listening from a quiet countryside village, a bustling city apartment, or somewhere in between, I'm grateful you're here. For the next little while, there is nothing you need to accomplish, nothing you need to solve, nothing you need to carry. Tonight, your only task is to rest, listen, and allow yourself to be carried gently by the wisdom of this story. So take one more deep breath, get comfortable, and let's begin. In a valley surrounded by mountains and crossed by winding rivers, there stood a village famous for its weavers. The people there created some of the finest cloth in the region. Their fabrics were known for their beauty, strength, and intricate patterns. Merchants traveled great distances to purchase them. Kings wore them, temples displayed them, families passed them down through generations. Among all the weavers in the village, none was more respected than an elderly woman named Hannah. Her work was extraordinary. The colors seemed alive. The patterns appeared almost magical. Many visitors believed her skill came from decades of experience. Others thought she possessed some secret technique. Whenever people asked how she created such beautiful cloth, Hannah would simply smile. Then she would say, "I pay attention to the threads." Most assumed she was speaking about weaving. In truth, she meant something else entirely. One spring, a young man named Sora arrived in the village hoping to become her apprentice. Sora was talented. His hands were quick. His eyes were sharp. He learned patterns faster than most students. Yet despite his ability, he often became frustrated. He wanted to master weaving immediately. He wanted perfect results. He wanted recognition. Most of all, he wanted success to arrive quickly. During his first months as an apprentice, he made constant mistakes. Threads tangled, patterns became uneven, colors clashed unexpectedly. Whenever this happened, Sora grew angry. He blamed poor materials, bad luck, distractions, anything except his own impatience. One afternoon, after unraveling several hours of work ruined by a mistake, he slammed his hands against the loom. "This is pointless." Hannah looked up from her weaving. "What is?" "All of it." The elderly woman waited. "The pattern keeps falling apart." She nodded. "And why do you think that is?" "Because one thread was wrong." Hannah smiled. "Only one?" Sora frowned. "What do you mean?" The old woman motioned him closer. Together they examined the cloth. At first glance, the mistake seemed small. A single thread crossed where it should not have. Yet as Hannah pointed further into the pattern, Sora noticed something surprising. The error had affected many other sections. One misplaced thread had gradually altered everything around it. The pattern remained recognizable, yet subtle distortions spread throughout the cloth. Hannah traced the design gently with her finger. "Nothing stands alone." The words seemed simple, yet she spoke them with unusual seriousness. That evening, Sora thought about the lesson, a single thread influencing an entire design. The idea lingered. Days later, he joined several villagers repairing a bridge damaged by winter storms. The work required many people, Carpenters, farmers, laborers, even children carried supplies. At one point, Sora watched an elderly man carefully hammer a single wooden peg into place. The task seemed insignificant compared to the rest of the bridge. Yet later, he learned that without the peg, an entire support beam would have failed. Again, he remembered Hana's words, "Nothing stands alone." Several weeks afterward, another lesson arrived. A drought affected nearby villages. Water became scarce. Tension grew. People worried about crops. Families worried about survival. One afternoon, a neighboring village sent representatives requesting assistance. Many villagers hesitated. Resources were limited. Fear encouraged caution. Yet Hana immediately supported helping. Later, Sora asked why. "If we share our supplies, won't we have less?" The old woman smiled. Then she handed him a piece of unfinished cloth. "What do you see?" "A pattern. And if I remove half the threads?" "The pattern falls apart." "Exactly." She looked toward the neighboring village. "The same is true of people." Sora listened carefully. We imagine ourselves separate. We imagine our lives belong only to us. We imagine our actions affect only ourselves. The old woman shook her head. But life is woven differently. The lesson puzzled him, yet over time, its meaning slowly revealed itself. Months passed. Summer arrived. The drought worsened. The village shared what resources it could. At first, some people complained, others worried. Yet something unexpected happened. When heavy rains finally returned, the neighboring villagers remembered the kindness they had received. Months later, when floods damaged parts of Sora's village, help arrived from every direction. Food, labor, materials, support. The generosity that had once flowed outward now flowed back, like a thread completing a pattern. One evening, while weaving beside Hana, Sora mentioned this observation. The old woman nodded. "The world is full of invisible threads." He looked up. "What do you mean?" Instead of answering immediately, Hana walked to a nearby window. The sun was setting. Golden light filled the room. The village below glowed warmly. Children played in the streets. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Dogs barked in the distance. The old woman pointed toward the scene. "Look carefully," Sora did. "What do you see?" "People." "What else?" "Houses, roads, animals." The old woman smiled. "Look deeper." He remained silent. Then she continued. "The farmer depends on the rain. The baker depends on the farmer. The merchant depends on the baker. The child depends on the parent. The parent depends on the community." Her voice remained soft, yet every word seemed important. The entire village exists because countless lives support one another. She turned back toward the loom. Like threads. For the first time, Sora began to glimpse what she meant. The realization deepened several years later. By then, he had become an accomplished weaver. People praised his work. Merchants sought his fabrics. His reputation spread beyond the valley. One autumn, a wealthy noble commissioned an enormous tapestry. It would be displayed in a palace. The project required months of effort. Sora devoted himself completely. Every detail mattered. Every thread was carefully chosen. Finally, after many months, the tapestry was completed. It was magnificent. Perhaps the finest work he had ever created. The noble was delighted. The payment was generous. Everyone celebrated. Yet that evening, while sitting alone beside the river, Sora felt strangely unsettled. The feeling surprised him. He had achieved exactly what he once desired. Recognition, success, respect. Why then did it feel incomplete? The following morning, he visited Hannah. By now she was very old. Her hands moved more slowly. Her eyesight had weakened, yet her presence remained steady. After listening to his concerns, she asked, "Who helped create the tapestry?" Sora looked confused. "I did." The old woman raised an eyebrow. "Did you?" The question lingered. Then she began naming people. The shepherd who cared for sheep providing wool, the dyers who created colors, the carpenters who built looms, the merchants who transported materials, the teachers who shared knowledge, the farmers who grew food, allowing everyone else to work. One by one, the list expanded. Eventually, Sora realized something extraordinary. The tapestry was not truly his alone. His hands had woven it, but countless lives had made it possible. The realization humbled him. It also brought unexpected peace. For years, he had viewed life through the lens of individual achievement. Now he saw something larger. No success belongs entirely to one person. No failure belongs entirely to one person. Everything arises through countless causes and conditions, like threads woven together. Years continued passing. Eventually, Hannah died peacefully. The entire village mourned her passing. At her funeral, many people shared stories. Some remembered her kindness. Others remembered her wisdom. Others remembered her extraordinary craftsmanship. When it came time for Sora to speak, he stood quietly before the gathered crowd. Then he held up a piece of cloth Hannah had woven long ago. The pattern was simple, beautiful, timeless. For several moments he simply looked at it. Then he said, "She taught me that life is woven from invisible threads." The crowd listened. We often see only ourselves, our goals, our struggles, our achievements. He ran his fingers across the fabric. But every life touches countless others. Every act of kindness, every word, every choice. We are constantly weaving one another's lives. Silence settled over the gathering. The lesson felt especially clear in that moment. Years later, when Sora himself became an elder teacher, students often asked for the secret to Hannah's wisdom. Rather than giving long explanations, he usually brought them to the loom. There, he would hand them a single thread. Then he would ask, "What happens if I remove this?" Most students answered, "Very little." Then he would begin unraveling part of a pattern, slowly, patiently, until they saw the truth. One thread rarely remains only one thread. Everything connects. Everything influences. Everything participates. Like rivers flowing into oceans. Like roots beneath a forest. Like stars within a night sky. Like threads within a tapestry. And perhaps that is the lesson. We often imagine ourselves separate from one another. Separate from nature. Separate from the world. Separate from life itself. Yet separation is often an illusion. Every breath depends on trees. Every meal depends on countless hands. Every friendship changes both people involved. Every kindness ripples outward. Every action becomes part of a larger design. We are all weavers, whether we realize it or not. Each thought, each word, each action, a thread. And together, through visible and invisible connections, we continuously weave the tapestry of the world. The question is not whether we are weaving. The question is what pattern we are helping create. Every evening, just before sunset, the Tanaka family gathered for dinner. It had been their tradition for as long as anyone could remember. No matter how busy the day became, everyone eventually found their way back to the table. The meals were rarely elaborate. Rice, vegetables, soup, occasionally fish, nothing extraordinary. Yet those evenings held a quiet importance. Stories were shared, problems were discussed, laughter appeared unexpectedly. Even silence felt comfortable. For many years, one chair always belonged to Grandfather Kenji. He sat near the window overlooking the garden. From his place at the table, he could watch the seasons change. Spring blossoms, summer rain, autumn leaves, winter snow. The chair became so familiar that nobody imagined it empty. Some things seem permanent simply because we have known them for a long time. Grandfather Kenji was one of those things. He had always been there, offering advice when asked, offering advice when not asked, telling stories, making jokes, fixing broken tools, teaching grandchildren how to plant seeds and prune trees. His presence felt woven into daily life, like sunlight entering through a window, not always noticed, yet deeply missed when absent. As the years passed, however, age slowly began changing him. His steps became slower, his hands less steady, his eyesight weaker. The family noticed these changes but rarely spoke about them, partly out of respect, partly out of denial, partly because acknowledging change often makes it feel more real. Kenji himself seemed untroubled. When someone commented on his age, he simply smiled. Everything ripens. Then he would return to whatever task occupied him. One spring, shortly after the cherry blossoms began blooming, Kenji became ill. At first, nobody worried. He had recovered from illnesses before. Surely this would be the same. Days passed, then weeks. The illness lingered. Doctors visited. Medicines were prescribed. Hope rose and fell like waves. Some mornings seemed promising, others did not. Eventually, everyone understood what no one wanted to say aloud. Kenji's life was nearing its end. The realization settled over the family like a heavy fog. Each person responded differently. His daughter cried often. His son immersed himself in work. The grandchildren avoided discussing it altogether. Only Kenji appeared calm. One afternoon, his oldest grandson, Akio, sat beside him in the garden. Neither spoke for several minutes. The cherry blossoms drifted through the air around them. Finally, Akio asked, "Are you afraid?" Kenji looked toward the trees. Then he smiled softly. "Sometimes." The answer surprised him. "You are?" "Of course." The old man chuckled. "Being calm doesn't mean never feeling fear." Akio nodded slowly. Then he asked, "How do you deal with it?" Kenji watched a blossom land upon the grass. "It helps to remember that everything I have ever loved has changed." The answer felt strange, perhaps even disappointing. Yet something about it lingered. Several weeks later, Grandfather Kenji passed away peacefully during the night. The family gathered, friends visited, ceremonies were held, stories were shared, tears flowed freely. The house felt different immediately, not because the furniture changed, not because the rooms changed, because one person was missing. And absence has a way of making itself visible, especially in familiar places. The most difficult part, surprisingly, was dinner. Every evening, the family continued gathering around the table. The meals remained similar. The conversations continued. Yet one chair stood empty. Everyone noticed it. Nobody mentioned it. At first, the empty chair felt unbearable. Each glance toward it reopened the wound. His daughter often looked away. His son focused on his plate. The grandchildren spoke less than before. The chair seemed to contain a silence larger than the room itself. One evening, several months after Kenji's passing, Akio remained at the table long after everyone else had left. The dishes had been cleared. The room was quiet. Only the empty chair remained. As he stared at it, an unexpected feeling arose. Not sadness. Not exactly. Confusion. Why did the chair still hurt so much? The funeral had ended months earlier. Life had continued. Yet the sight of that empty space continued affecting him deeply. The following morning, he visited a small temple outside the village. An elderly monk named Ryokan lived there. Many people sought his guidance during difficult times. Akio found him sweeping fallen leaves from a stone path. After bowing respectfully, he explained his struggle. The monk listened patiently. Then he asked, "What troubles you most?" "The chair." Ryokan smiled gently. "The chair?" Akio nodded. "It reminds me that he's gone." The monk leaned on his broom. Then he asked, "Would you rather the chair had never existed?" The question startled him. "Of course not." "Why not?" "Because it belonged to my grandfather." The old monk nodded. "And what made it meaningful?" Akio thought for a moment, then answered, "The fact that he sat there." Ryokan smiled. "Exactly." The monk resumed sweeping. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Ryokan said, "Sometimes we focus so much on what has ended that we forget what was given." The words lingered. Over the following weeks, Akio reflected on them often. Gradually, he noticed something. Whenever he looked at the chair, his attention immediately moved to absence. What was missing? What had been lost? What could never return? Yet the chair also represented something else. Years of shared meals, stories, laughter, lessons, love. The empty chair existed because it had once been occupied. The pain existed because the relationship had mattered. One evening, while sitting alone at the table, he remembered a particular story his grandfather used to tell. A farmer had once complained that autumn leaves fell from the trees. The farmer considered it wasteful, sad, unnecessary. A wise teacher had responded, "Would you prefer the tree never produced leaves at all?" At the time, the story seemed simple. Now it felt profound. The leaves fall precisely because they first appeared. Loss exists because love existed. The realization did not erase grief, but it changed its shape. Several months later, the family faced an unexpected decision. They were renovating part of the house. The dining room needed changes. Some suggested removing the empty chair entirely. Others wanted to store it elsewhere. The discussion became surprisingly emotional. Everyone seemed unsure. Finally, Akio spoke. "Leave it." The family looked at him. "Why?" his mother asked. He considered carefully before answering. "Because the chair is not empty." The room grew quiet. His mother wiped away tears, and somehow everyone understood. The chair no longer represented only absence. It represented presence too. A life shared, a place occupied, a love that remained visible even after death. Years passed. The family continued gathering for dinner. New grandchildren were born. Children grew older. The house changed. The garden changed. The world changed. The chair remained. Visitors occasionally asked about it. The family would smile, then tell stories. Stories about Kenji. Stories that might otherwise have faded. In this way, the chair continued serving a purpose, not as a monument to loss, but as a reminder of gratitude. One autumn evening, many years later, Akio sat beside his young daughter during dinner. She had never met Kenji, yet she knew many stories about him. As they ate, she pointed toward the familiar chair. "Why does nobody sit there?" Akio smiled. Then he told her the story. The whole story. When he finished, she remained quiet for a moment, Then she asked, "Do you still miss him?" Akio looked toward the chair. The answer came easily. "Every day." His daughter frowned slightly. "Doesn't that make you sad?" He considered the question. Then he answered, "Sometimes." He smiled softly, "But mostly it makes me grateful." The little girl seemed to think deeply about this. Then she nodded. Children often understand more than adults expect. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Akio remained at the table alone. Moonlight entered through the window. The garden outside shimmered softly. The empty chair stood where it always had. Yet it no longer felt empty. Not really, because absence and presence often exist together. A person may leave, yet their influence remains. Their words remain. Their kindness remains. Their lessons remain. Their love remains. The chair had never been about furniture. It had always been about memory, about gratitude, about recognizing that impermanence does not erase meaning. The Buddha taught that everything changes. Everything. Relationships, bodies, seasons, lives. Many people hear this teaching and focus only on sadness. But there is another side. Impermanence is also what makes every moment precious. If nothing changed, nothing would matter. If life lasted forever, we might never appreciate it. The cherry blossom is beautiful because it falls. A sunset is beautiful because it ends. A conversation is precious because it cannot be repeated exactly. And a chair becomes meaningful because someone once sat there. Perhaps that is the lesson. Every life eventually leaves an empty chair somewhere. At a table, in a garden, on a porch, beside a river. The empty chair will hurt for a while, maybe for a long while. That is natural. That is love. But with time, if we look carefully, we may discover something. The chair is not only a symbol of loss, it is also evidence of a gift. Evidence that someone was here, that they shared their life, that they left traces of kindness, wisdom, laughter, and love behind them. And when we see that clearly, the chair remains empty. Yet the heart feels a little fuller. For gratitude and grief are not enemies. Often they sit together at the same table. And sometimes, if we allow them, they teach us how to cherish what was given without demanding that it stay forever. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us turn to a tale about recognition and the true nature of worth. This is the next story. There was a forest so vast that travelers often spoke about it in whispers. The forest stretched for miles in every direction. Ancient trees blocked much of the sunlight. Thick moss covered fallen logs. Mist drifted between the trunks during the early mornings. Birdsong echoed from unseen branches. During the day, the forest felt mysterious. At night, it felt endless. Many roads crossed through it. Some led to villages. Some led to mountains. Some disappeared into places few people ever visited. Most travelers passed through safely, yet nearly everyone agreed on one thing. No one enjoyed being lost there after dark. Among the people living near the forest was a young man named Hiro. Hiro was intelligent, curious, energetic. He loved learning new things. Books fascinated him. Maps fascinated him. Stories fascinated him. He often dreamed about traveling far beyond the places he knew, yet he carried a hidden weakness. Hiro hated uncertainty. Whenever he encountered a problem, he immediately wanted answers. When facing a decision, he wanted guarantees. When considering the future, he wanted certainty, not possibility, not probability, certainty. Unfortunately, life rarely provides such things. One autumn afternoon, Hiro set out to visit a village on the far side of the forest. The journey was familiar. He had walked the route before. The weather appeared calm. The sky was clear. Everything seemed straightforward, at least initially. Several hours into the journey, dark clouds gathered unexpectedly. A storm rolled across the hills. Wind shook the trees. Rain began falling. The path became slippery. Visibility worsened. The forest darkened much earlier than usual. Soon, Hero realized something troubling. He had taken a wrong turn. At first, he remained calm. He simply retraced his steps, or attempted to. The paths looked different in the rain. Landmarks seemed unfamiliar. The storm distorted everything. Minutes became hours. The forest grew darker. Eventually, Hero stopped walking. Fear had begun creeping into his thoughts. What if I spend the night here? What if I cannot find the path? What if wild animals are nearby? What if no one finds me? The questions multiplied rapidly. Each possibility produced another. His breathing quickened. His heart raced. The darkness seemed to expand around him. Then, through the rain, he noticed a small light. Very small. Barely visible. At first, he thought he imagined it. Then he saw it again. A lantern. Someone was carrying a lantern through the forest. Relief flooded through him. He hurried toward the light. Eventually, he found its source. An elderly traveler walking slowly along a narrow trail. The old man carried a simple lantern made of wood and paper. The lantern illuminated only a few feet ahead, nothing more. Hero bowed respectfully. "I am lost." The traveler nodded. "I suspected as much." The young man looked around anxiously. "Do you know the way out?" "Yes." Relief deepened. "Wonderful." Then Hero looked at the lantern. Its light seemed surprisingly weak. The forest remained overwhelmingly dark. The young man frowned. "Is that your only lantern?" "Yes." "It barely lights anything." The traveler smiled. "Enough." Hero looked unconvinced. The old man began walking. After a moment, Hero followed. For several minutes they moved silently through the forest. The lantern illuminated only a short section of trail, perhaps 3 or 4 steps ahead, no more. The darkness beyond remained complete. Eventually, Hero grew frustrated. "How can you travel like this?" The old man glanced back. "Like what?" "Without seeing the entire path." The traveler chuckled softly. "I have never seen the entire path." The answer irritated him. What if there is danger ahead? There might be. What if the trail disappears? It might. What if... The old man interrupted gently. "What if the trail continues?" Hero fell silent. The traveler smiled. "The mind enjoys creating darkness beyond the lantern." The two continued walking. Rain tapped softly against leaves overhead. The forest seemed endless. Yet each time they reached the edge of the lantern's glow, a few more steps appeared. Then a few more. Then a few more. The path never revealed itself all at once, only gradually. One small section at a time. Several hours later, they reached a small shelter used by travelers during storms. Inside stood a wooden bench and a fireplace. The old man lit a fire. Soon, warmth filled the space. Hero felt calmer. After sharing a simple meal, he asked, "How do you remain so relaxed?" The traveler smiled. "About what?" "The uncertainty." The old man considered carefully, then pointed toward the lantern resting beside the wall. "Most people believe they need enough light to see the entire journey." He paused. "But life rarely works that way." The fire crackled softly. Outside, rain continued falling. The traveler continued. "You only need enough light for the next step." The words felt simple, yet something about them lingered. The old man introduced himself as Kenzo. He had spent decades traveling, crossing mountains, forests, deserts, villages, cities. Listening to him, Hiro realized that Kenzo possessed something rare, not certainty. Peace despite uncertainty. The difference mattered. The following morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight filtered through the trees. The forest looked entirely different, less threatening, more beautiful. Before continuing their journey, Hiro asked, "How did you learn this?" Kenzo smiled. "The lantern?" "Yes." The old traveler laughed. "By being lost." Many times, as it turned out. He explained that during his younger years, he constantly demanded clarity. He wanted detailed plans, perfect information, complete certainty. Whenever uncertainty appeared, anxiety followed. Eventually, life taught him something different. Most important decisions occur before complete certainty arrives. Most journeys unfold one step at a time. Most answers reveal themselves gradually. The lesson sounded obvious, yet Hiro sensed its depth. For the remainder of the journey, he paid close attention to the lantern. Even during daylight, it became a symbol. Each evening, when darkness arrived, the lantern revealed only a small section of road, never the destination, never the entire route, and yet somehow it proved sufficient. Days later, after reaching the village, Hiro thanked Kenzo. The old traveler prepared to continue onward. Before departing, he handed the lantern to Hiro. The young man looked surprised. "I cannot take this." Kenzo smiled. "You can. But what will you use?" The old traveler laughed. "I have carried many lanterns." Then he pointed toward Hiro's chest. "The important one is already there." The statement made little sense, at least at the time. Years passed. Hiro eventually returned home, yet the lesson remained. Life quickly provided opportunities to practice it. His father became ill. Business opportunities appeared. Relationships changed. Difficult decisions emerged. Again and again, he noticed the same pattern. His mind wanted complete certainty. The future refused to provide it. At first, this frustrated him. Then he remembered the forest, the lantern, the next step. One winter, a severe drought affected the region. Many farmers panicked. The future seemed unclear. People demanded answers, predictions, guarantees. No one possessed them. One evening, several villagers gathered seeking Hiro's advice. By now, he had become respected for his calm judgment. "What should we do?" they asked. Hiro thought carefully, then smiled. The next thing. The villagers looked confused. He explained. They could not control rainfall. They could not predict every outcome, but they could prepare water storage, help one another, protect crops where possible, take the next step, then the next, then the next. The approach proved surprisingly effective, not because it eliminated uncertainty, because it prevented paralysis. Years later, Hiro became a teacher. Students often approached him overwhelmed by life's complexity. What career should I choose? What if I fail? What if I choose incorrectly? What if the future goes badly? The questions varied. The anxiety remained remarkably similar. Whenever possible, Hiro shared the story of the lantern. Most students expected wisdom to arrive as certainty. Instead, he offered something different. Trust. Trust in the next step. Trust in awareness. Trust in the ability to respond when circumstances changed. One evening, while teaching beside a temple garden, a student asked, "How do I know I am on the right path?" Hiro smiled, then pointed toward a lantern hanging nearby. "What does the lantern show?" "A few steps." "Exactly." The student frowned. That doesn't answer my question. Hero laughed softly. It does. The young man looked puzzled. The teacher continued. If you wait to see the entire path before taking a step, you may remain standing forever. Silence settled over the garden. The lesson landed, not fully, but enough. Late in life, Hiro returned to the forest where he first met Kenzo. The trees seemed smaller now, or perhaps he had changed. The paths remained, the streams remained, the silence remained. As evening approached, he carried a lantern through the woods, the same lantern, weathered by time, the paper replaced several times, the wood worn smooth by years of use. Darkness gradually filled the forest. The lantern illuminated only a few feet ahead, exactly as before. Yet now the limitation felt comforting, not frightening, because he finally understood. Life itself resembles traveling through a dark forest. We rarely see the entire route, rarely understand the future completely, rarely possess all the answers. And yet, somehow, step by step, the path unfolds. The Buddha often taught that wisdom is not the absence of uncertainty. Wisdom is learning how to move through uncertainty without becoming lost in fear. The lantern never reveals everything. It reveals enough. Enough for this moment. Enough for the next step. Enough to continue. And perhaps that is the lesson. Many people spend years demanding complete certainty before they begin. Complete certainty before they trust. Complete certainty before they change. Complete certainty before they live. But life does not offer such guarantees. The future remains hidden. The path remains mysterious. The forest remains dark beyond the lantern's glow. Yet the next step is usually visible. And then the next. And then the next. You do not need enough light for the entire journey. Only enough light for the step you are taking now. The rest will reveal itself when the time comes, just as it always has, just as it always will. As we move deeper into the quiet teachings of Zen, we come to a story about seeing clearly and understanding true value. Listen carefully to the next story. This story has a wonderful lesson and tells you a bit more about compassion over fear. The forest had many rulers. At least, that is what the animals believed. The elephants ruled the riverbanks with their size and memory. The monkeys ruled the treetops with their noise and clever hands. The eagles ruled the open sky with their sharp eyes and silent wings. But in the deepest part of the forest, where the trees grew close together and sunlight reached the ground only in thin golden lines, there was one creature everyone feared, the tiger. His name was Varu. He was large, powerful, and scarred from many seasons of survival. His orange coat burned like fire between the trees. His black stripes moved like shadows. When he walked, even the dry leaves seemed afraid to make sound beneath his paws. The animals spoke of him in whispers. Mothers warned their young, "Do not wander near the dark grove." Birds stopped singing when he passed. Monkeys climbed higher. Deer froze at the faintest scent of him. Even the wild boars, strong and stubborn as they were, avoided the paths where his footprints appeared. Varu knew he was feared, and for many years he believed fear was the same as respect. When animals fled from him, he felt powerful. When the forest grew silent around him, he thought it meant he was important. When others trembled, he believed it proved his strength. But the truth was more complicated. Varu was not only feared, he was alone. No animal rested near him. No bird sang close to him. No creature trusted him. Wherever he went, the forest emptied. He told himself this was the way of tigers. A tiger walks alone. A tiger needs no one. A tiger survives by strength. And because he repeated these thoughts often enough, he almost believed them. Almost. Near the edge of the same forest lived a gentle deer named Scylla. She was not the largest deer in the herd, nor the fastest, nor the most beautiful, but she had a quiet presence that others trusted. When young fawns became frightened, they stood beside her. When older deer grew tired, she slowed her pace. When birds sounded an alarm, she listened carefully before running, never panicking before understanding. The herd respected her not because she demanded respect, but because she made others feel safe. Scylla knew fear well. All deer know fear. It lived in their bodies like a second heartbeat, a snapping twig, a strange scent, a shadow moving too quickly. Fear could save a deer's life, but Scylla had learned something many animals did not. Fear was useful as a messenger, dangerous as a master. When fear warned her, she listened. But she tried not to let fear decide everything. This made her unusual. Some deer admired her calmness. Others thought it foolish. One evening, as the herd grazed near a field of tall grass, a young buck named Joran approached her. "You walk too slowly," he said. Scylla lifted her head. "Do I?" "Yes, you pause too often. You look at things too long. One day your calmness will get you killed." Scylla looked toward the darkening trees. "Perhaps." Joran snorted. "When there is danger, the wise run." "When there is danger, yes," Scylla replied. "And when there is only fear?" The young buck had no answer. He flicked his ears and walked away. That night, the moon rose pale above the forest. Mist gathered between the trunks. Most of the herd slept in a sheltered clearing. Scylla remained awake for a while, listening. Crickets sang. Leaves rustled softly. Far away, an owl called. Then she heard something else. A low sound, not a roar, not a growl, something quieter, almost like pain. Scylla stood still. The sound came again. It drifted from the direction of the dark grove, the place where no deer willingly went, the place where Varu the tiger was said to hunt. Every instinct in Scylla's body told her to turn away. Her ears sharpened, her legs tightened, her breathing grew shallow. Fear had arrived, and fear said, "Run." But the sound came again. This time, Scylla heard it more clearly. It was not the sound of hunting, it was the sound of suffering. She took one step forward, then stopped. Another deer nearby stirred. "Scylla?" whispered an older doe named Mara. "Where are you going?" "I heard something." Mara lifted her head. "What?" "I am not sure." The sound came again from the darkness. Mara's eyes widened. "That is the tiger's direction." "I know." "Then do not go." Scylla remained still. The forest waited. Mara spoke urgently. "No good comes from walking toward a tiger." Scylla looked at her gently. "Perhaps not." "Then stay." For a long moment, Scylla said nothing. Then she answered, "If fear is correct, I will return quickly." "And if fear is wrong?" Scylla looked toward the dark grove. "Then something may need help." Mara stared at her as though she had lost her senses. Before she could reply, Scylla stepped into the trees. The forest became colder beneath the branches. The moonlight weakened. Every shadow seemed alive. Scylla moved slowly, placing each hoof carefully upon the earth. Her body remained ready to flee. She did not pretend there was no danger. Compassion is not blindness. It does not walk into darkness with closed eyes. It sees the danger clearly, and still asks whether fear is telling the whole truth. The painful sound came again, closer now. Scylla followed it through ferns, around fallen logs, and beneath old branches tangled with vines. Then she saw him. Varu. The tiger lay near a dry stream bed, half hidden beneath a leaning tree. One of his front paws was caught in a hunter's iron trap. The trap had closed around his leg, biting deep. Blood stained the ground. His breathing was heavy. His eyes burned with pain and fury. Scylla froze. Every story she had ever heard about him returned at once. The tiger who stalked in silence. The tiger who killed without mercy. The tiger whose shadow emptied the forest. Varuu saw her. His lips pulled back. A low growl rolled from his throat. "Come closer," he said, "and I will tear you apart." Scylla's legs trembled. There was no shame in that. Only fools feel no fear near danger. She took one step back. Varuu growled again. "Run, little deer." Scylla should have obeyed. Any other deer would have vanished before his next breath. But she noticed something. The tiger's growl was powerful, but tired. His threat was fierce, but desperate. He was not standing. He was trapped. And beneath his anger, Scylla could hear pain. She stayed where she was. "I heard you." Varu's eyes narrowed. "Then you should have run." "I nearly did." "Then why are you still here?" Scylla looked at the iron trap. "Because you are suffering." The tiger laughed bitterly. It was a terrible sound. "And what is that to you?" Scylla did not answer immediately. The wind moved softly through the leaves. Finally, she said, "I do not know yet." Varuu stared at her. He had expected fear. He had expected running. He had expected trembling. He had not expected honesty. "Leave," he said. Scylla looked around. The trap was attached to a heavy chain wrapped around the root of a tree. The hunters who had set it were nowhere nearby, but they might return at dawn. If they did, Varuu would die. The forest would no longer fear him. Many animals might even feel safer. A thought appeared in Scylla's mind. Perhaps I should leave. Perhaps this is justice. Perhaps the forest would be better without him. The thought was not cruel. It was understandable. Varuu had frightened many, hunted many, harmed many. Fear argued strongly. But then Scylla looked again, not at the stories, not at the reputation, not at the shadow he cast in the minds of others, at the living creature before her, breathing, bleeding, trapped, in pain. The Buddha's teachings, though Scylla had never heard them spoken in human words, lived deeply in the natural world. Suffering is suffering. Fear divides it into worthy and unworthy. Compassion sees more clearly. Scylla took one careful step closer. Varu's body tensed. "I warned you." "I heard. Then you are foolish." "Perhaps." The tiger's tail struck the ground. "Why would you help me?" Scylla looked at him. "Because pain is pain." Something flickered in Varu's eyes. Not softness. Not yet. Confusion. No creature had ever said such a thing to him. Animals feared him. Hunters hated him. Rivals challenged him. But help? Compassion? Toward him? It made no sense. Scylla examined the trap from a distance. The metal jaws were strong, too strong for her to open with her hooves. But the chain around the root had loosened slightly, where the rain had softened the soil. If the root could be exposed, perhaps the chain could slip free. She moved closer. Varuu growled again, but weaker this time. "Do not touch me." "I am not touching you." "What are you doing?" "Looking." The tiger watched suspiciously as the deer circled the tree. She began scraping the soft earth around the root with her hooves. Slowly, carefully. The work was difficult. The ground was tangled with stones and smaller roots. Her legs were not made for digging. Still, she continued. Varuu stared. Minutes passed, then longer. The forest remained silent around them. At last, he said, "You are wasting your time." Scylla kept digging. The hunters will return. I know. You cannot open the trap. Perhaps not. I may still kill you. Scylla paused, then looked at him. Yes. The answer irritated him. Then why continue? Scylla lowered her head and resumed scraping earth. Because I have not yet finished trying. Varuu did not know what to say. The moon traveled slowly across the sky. Scylla worked until her legs ached. Several times she stopped to listen. No hunters, no footsteps, only wind. At last, enough soil loosened around the root that the chain shifted. Varuu felt it. His ears lifted. Scylla pushed her head carefully against the chain, trying to move it. It scraped against bark. The tiger pulled his trapped leg and roared in pain. Scylla leapt back. For a moment, fear nearly overwhelmed her. The roar shook the trees. Birds burst from branches. The entire forest seemed to wake. Varuu lowered his head, panting. Go, he said. His voice was different now, not threatening, defeated. Scylla watched him. Blood continued seeping from his leg. The first pale hint of dawn would come soon. She stepped forward again. No. Varuu closed his eyes. Why? Scylla pushed again at the chain. Because you are not free yet. Something inside the tiger shifted. Only slightly, but truly. For the first time in his life, he did not understand strength. He had believed strength was the power to frighten, the power to dominate, the power to make others flee. But the deer before him was afraid. He could smell it, hear it in her breath, see it in the tremble of her legs. And still she stayed. What kind of strength was that? Scylla pushed once more. The chain moved, only a little, then another little. Varuu gathered what strength he had left and pulled. Pain shot through his body. The root cracked. The chain slipped lower. Scylla scraped more earth away. Again he pulled. The root split. The chain loosened. With one final desperate movement, Varuu dragged himself backward. The chain slipped free from the tree. He was still caught in the trap, but no longer chained to the root. He could move. Barely. Scylla stepped back, exhausted. Varuu looked at her. For a long time, neither spoke. The tiger's paw remained wounded. The trap still clung to him. But if he could reach the rocky ravine nearby, perhaps he could break the mechanism against stone. Perhaps. Dawn was approaching. Scylla knew she had to leave. The herd would be searching for her. The hunters might return. The tiger might change his mind. She turned slowly. Before she disappeared into the trees, Varuu spoke. Dear. Scylla looked back. His voice was low, still rough, still proud, but something in it had changed. What is your name? Scylla. The tiger repeated it silently. Then he said, I do not understand you. Scylla looked at him gently. No, she paused. But perhaps one day you will. Then she walked away into the grey light of morning. Behind her, Varuu lay alone with the broken root, the loosened chain, and a question he could not escape. Why would one who fears me choose to help me? The question followed him more painfully than the trap. And for the first time in many years, the tiger feared something other than hunger, hunters, or death. He feared that everything he believed about strength might be wrong. The forest woke slowly. Mist drifted between the trees. Birds greeted the dawn. Sunlight filtered through the branches in pale golden beams. And deep within the dark grove, Varuu the tiger remained motionless. Not because he wished to, because he was thinking. The trap still clung to his injured paw. Pain pulsed through his leg. Every movement hurt. Yet the physical pain seemed strangely distant compared to the question turning inside his mind. Why? Why had the deer stayed? The answer should have been obvious. There should have been a reason, a hidden motive, a benefit, some advantage, yet he could find none. The deer had gained nothing. She had risked everything. And for whom? For him, a tiger, a hunter, a creature feared by nearly every animal in the forest. The idea felt impossible, and yet it had happened. Varoo lowered his head. For years, he'd understood the world in simple terms: strength and weakness, hunter and hunted, fear and survival. The strong took, the weak fled. That was reality. That was nature. Or so he had always believed. Yet the gentle deer had acted according to a completely different law. A law he could not understand. A law stronger than fear. Several hours later, Varoo reached the rocky ravine. The journey exhausted him. 3 times he nearly collapsed. Twice he considered giving up, but eventually he found a narrow gap between 2 large stones. With enormous effort, he wedged the trap into the rocks. Then he pulled. The metal resisted. Again, nothing. Again. Pain exploded through his leg. Then suddenly, crack, the mechanism broke. The trap fell away. Varoo collapsed onto the ground, free, wounded, but free. For several days, he hid within the ravine while his leg slowly healed. Normally, he would have focused entirely on recovery. Instead, his thoughts repeatedly returned to Scylla, the deer, her calm voice, her trembling legs, her refusal to leave, her compassion. The memory irritated him because it made him question things, and questioning was uncomfortable. Much easier to trust old beliefs, much easier to remain the tiger everyone feared. Yet something had changed, whether he wanted it to or not. One afternoon, while resting beneath an overhanging rock, Varoo noticed a small rabbit trapped beneath a fallen branch. The animal struggled desperately. Its hind leg was pinned. Normally the tiger would have ignored it or eaten it. Such things belong to the ordinary order of life. The rabbit noticed him. Its eyes widened with terror. It stopped struggling, accepted its fate. Varoo stared. Then something strange happened. For a brief moment, he saw himself, trapped, helpless, waiting. The memory returned with surprising force. The iron trap, the chain, the pain, the deer. The tiger growled softly, annoyed, confused. Then he stepped forward. The rabbit squeezed its eyes shut. The branch lifted. Varoo pushed it aside. The rabbit remained frozen. Certain death would follow. Instead, the tiger stepped away. Several seconds passed. Then the rabbit fled into the forest. Varoo watched it disappear. The feeling that followed surprised him. Not pride, not satisfaction. Something quieter, lighter, as though a burden had shifted slightly. The sensation disturbed him. He immediately tried to forget it, but forgetting proved difficult. Meanwhile, word of Scylla's nighttime disappearance had spread through the deer herd. Most assumed she had narrowly escaped danger. Some believed she had become reckless. Others admired her courage. The loudest criticism came from Joran, the young buck who valued caution above all else. When Scylla finally explained what had happened, disbelief spread through the herd. "You helped a tiger?" Joran stared at her. "Yes." "Why?" "He was suffering." The young buck looked horrified. "He would have killed you." "Perhaps." "Perhaps." Joran shook his head. "You risked your life for a predator." Several deer nodded in agreement. The criticism intensified throughout the following days. Some questioned her judgment. Others questioned her wisdom. A few questioned her sanity. One evening, Joran confronted her directly. "You are teaching dangerous lessons." Scylla looked at him calmly. "What lesson am I teaching?" That fear should be ignored. The deer shook her head. No. Then what? Sila thought carefully, then answered. That fear should be listened to. Joran looked confused, but not obeyed automatically. The young buck frowned. The distinction felt subtle, too subtle. What if you had died? Sila looked toward the forest. What if I had not helped? Neither could answer. Several weeks passed. Summer deepened. The forest flourished. The tiger's leg gradually healed. The deer herd continued grazing. Life seemed to return to normal. Yet beneath the surface, something new was growing, in both of them. One evening, while searching for water during a particularly hot day, Sila approached a stream she often visited. The moment she arrived, she froze. Varu stood on the opposite bank. The tiger noticed her immediately. Silence settled between them. The stream flowed gently. Birds continued singing. Neither moved. Every instinct screamed inside Sila's body. Danger. Tiger. Run. Fear remained alive. Compassion had never removed it. Fear serves a purpose. It protects, warns, guides. The question was whether fear alone would decide what happened next. Varu remained still. The old version of himself would have enjoyed this moment. The power, the tension, the knowledge that another creature feared him. Instead, he felt strangely uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke. My leg healed. Sila nodded. I can see that. Silence returned. The tiger looked toward the water, then back at her. You saved my life. The words sounded awkward, as though he had never spoken them before. Perhaps he hadn't. Sila smiled slightly. You saved it too. The tiger frowned. What do you mean? You had to keep trying. The answer puzzled him. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. A genuine laugh. Short, rough, but real. The sound startled both of them. For a moment, neither seemed certain what to do next. Eventually, Sila lowered her head and drank. Varu did the same. The moment passed. Simple, ordinary, yet somehow significant. When they finally departed, neither felt quite the same as before. Months continued flowing by. Autumn approached. Leaves began changing color. The forest prepared for another cycle. One afternoon, disaster arrived. Hunters, not one or two, an entire group. They entered the forest seeking valuable animal skins. Large traps appeared along hidden paths. Snares were placed near streams. Danger spread quickly. Animals vanished. Birds carried warnings from tree to tree. Fear swept through the forest. For good reason. Unlike imagined dangers, these dangers were real. One morning, panic erupted among the deer. A young fawn had become trapped. The hunters had not yet returned, but they would. Soon. The herd gathered nearby. No one knew what to do. The trap was hidden beneath bushes. Strong metal jaws held the fawn's leg. The little deer cried softly. Its mother stood trembling nearby. Fear dominated everything. Many deer wanted to flee immediately. Others wanted to help, but felt powerless. Then Sila arrived. She examined the trap. The sight awakened old memories. The tiger, the chain, the suffering, the choice. Without hesitation, she began searching for a way to free the fawn. The problem was difficult. The trap was strong. Time was short. Then a shadow appeared among the trees. The herd immediately panicked. Tiger! Deer scattered. Fear exploded through the clearing, all except Sila. Varu emerged slowly from the forest. The trapped fawn froze. The mother deer nearly collapsed from terror. Every instinct told the herd to run. The tiger stopped several paces away. His eyes moved from the trap, to the frightened fawn, to Sila. Then he understood. No words were necessary. The deer stared at him. The tiger stared back. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Varu stepped forward. The herd gasped. Several deer prepared to flee. But Sila remained calm. Very calm. The tiger approached the trap. His powerful jaws closed around the metal. Muscles tightened. The mechanism groaned, then snapped open. The fawn tumbled free. Instantly, its mother rushed forward. The pair disappeared into the trees. The herd remained frozen, unable to believe what they had witnessed. The tiger had freed one of them. Not hunted, not attacked, freed. Varu stepped backward, then turned toward the forest. Before leaving, he looked once at Sila. No words, none were needed. Then he vanished among the trees. The clearing remained silent long after he disappeared. The event spread throughout the forest. Animals argued about it for weeks. Some refused to believe it. Others insisted it was a trick. Many simply felt confused. Predators were not supposed to behave that way. Fear relied upon simple stories. The strong threaten, the weak flee. The world is divided. Compassion complicates such stories. Several months later, winter arrived. Heavy snow covered the forest. Food became scarce. Life became difficult. One particularly harsh storm trapped many animals in their shelters for days. When the weather finally cleared, widespread hunger followed. The conditions affected everyone, including predators, including deer. One evening, Sila discovered something unusual. A small cache of food left near a sheltered clearing. Roots, berries, plants preserved beneath snow. Enough to help several hungry animals survive. No one knew who placed it there, at least initially. But large paw prints nearby revealed the truth. Varu. The tiger had found food, then shared it. Not because he benefited, not because anyone would praise him, simply because suffering is suffering. The lesson he once received had begun changing him, slowly, quietly, like water shaping stone. Years passed. The forest changed. Animals came and went. Young became old. Old became stories. And among those stories, one became especially famous. The story of the tiger and the deer. Children often asked, weren't they afraid? The elders always smiled, because the answer mattered. Yes, they were afraid. Both of them. Courage is not the absence of fear. Compassion is not the absence of fear. They are choices made despite fear. The tiger learned that strength without compassion creates loneliness. The deer learned that compassion without wisdom becomes recklessness. Together, they discovered something deeper. Fear protects life. Compassion transforms it. Late in life, when Sila's muzzle had turned grey and Varu's movements had slowed with age, they met one final time beside the stream where they once drank together. The water flowed gently. Autumn leaves drifted across its surface. The tiger lay beneath a tree. The deer stood nearby. Neither spoke for a while. The silence felt comfortable. Finally, Varu asked, "Why did you help me?" The question had survived all those years. Sila smiled. "You still don't know." The tiger shook his head. She looked toward the water, then answered, "Because fear saw a tiger, and compassion saw suffering." The old tiger closed his eyes. At last, he understood, not merely with his mind, with his life. And perhaps that is the lesson. Fear is not wrong. Fear warns us about danger. Fear protects us. Fear helps us survive. But fear sees only one part of reality. Compassion sees another. Fear asks, how can I protect myself? Compassion asks, how can I reduce suffering? Wisdom listens to both. The Buddha taught that hatred never ends through hatred. Fear never ends through fear. Only compassion has the power to interrupt the cycle. Not because compassion is weak, because it requires extraordinary courage. Anyone can react according to fear. Few can remain open-hearted while afraid. The gentle deer changed the tiger changed the forest. And neither transformation began with power. It began with a simple choice. One creature seeing another creature's pain and refusing to look away. For compassion does not erase fear. It simply reminds us that there is something greater. And when we act from that greater place, even the fiercest tiger can learn gentleness. And even the smallest deer can teach wisdom. With each step on the Zen path, a new lesson unfolds. Now we turn to a story about recognition, of self, of others, and of what truly matters. Listen carefully to the next story. The road wound through mountains, forests, villages, and valleys. Some sections were smooth, others were steep. Some crossed beautiful landscapes filled with wildflowers and singing birds. Others passed through rocky terrain where little seemed to grow. Yet travelers continued using the road because it connected distant regions and offered one of the few reliable routes across the country. Among those travelers was a man named Kaito. At first glance, Kaito appeared ordinary. He was neither rich nor poor, neither young nor old. His clothing was simple, his face unremarkable. Yet anyone who walked beside him for more than a few minutes noticed something unusual. His backpack. The pack looked enormous, far larger than necessary. It sat heavily upon his shoulders. The straps dug deeply into his clothing. His posture leaned forward from the weight. His steps seemed slower than they should have been. Whenever travelers passed him, they often asked the same question. "What are you carrying?" Kaito usually smiled politely. "Just my things." The answer ended most conversations. Yet it was not entirely true, because the backpack contained more than clothing and supplies. Much more. Years earlier, Kaito had begun carrying certain memories. Not literally, emotionally. A betrayal by a trusted friend, the death of his father, a failed business, a relationship that ended painfully, a public embarrassment he never forgot, an opportunity he missed, a mistake he deeply regretted. The events themselves had happened long ago, yet Kaito continued carrying them, replaying them, revisiting them, protecting them, feeding them. The backpack became a perfect symbol. Every regret added weight. Every resentment added weight. Every old wound added weight. He rarely noticed the process. The burden accumulated gradually, like stones dropped into a bag one at a time. No single stone seemed significant. Eventually, the load became enormous. Yet because he carried it every day, it felt normal, at least to him. One spring morning, Kaito arrived at a mountain village. The journey there had been difficult. Steep trails, cold weather, strong winds. His shoulders ached, his back throbbed, his knees hurt. After renting a small room for the night, he sat outside an inn watching the sunset. An elderly monk happened to be staying there as well. The monk's name was Ryokan. He carried no backpack, only a walking staff and a small cloth bag. The contrast amused Kaito. The old man looked light enough to be carried by the wind. Eventually, the monk sat beside him. Neither spoke for several minutes. The sky slowly changed color. Orange became red. Red became violet. The village grew quieter. Finally, Ryokan asked, "How far have you traveled?" Kaito named several regions. The monk nodded. "A long journey?" "Yes." "And a heavy one?" Kaito laughed. You notice the backpack. The old monk smiled. It is difficult not to. Kaito shrugged. A traveler needs supplies. The monk nodded. Of course. Then he asked, what would happen if you removed a few unnecessary things? The younger man smiled. I already carry only what I need. The old monk did not argue. He simply nodded. The conversation ended. Or so Kaito thought. The next morning, they found themselves leaving the village at nearly the same time. Their routes followed the same mountain path. So, they walked together. The road climbed steadily. Birds sang in the trees. Sunlight filtered through pine branches. The day felt pleasant. Yet Kaito struggled. The backpack seemed heavier than usual. After several hours, they stopped beside a stream. While drinking water, Ryokan asked, what is the heaviest thing you carry? Kaito immediately touched the backpack. My cooking equipment. The monk smiled. No. The younger man frowned. My blanket. No. My water. The monk shook his head gently. No. Silence settled between them. Then Ryokan asked, do you still think about the man who betrayed you? Kaito froze. The question struck unexpectedly. How do you know about that? The old monk smiled. You told me yesterday. I did not. Not with words. The monk's eyes remained kind. But you told me. The younger traveler looked away. The betrayal had happened 12 years earlier. A business partner had stolen money and disappeared. The loss nearly ruined him. The memory remained vivid, painfully vivid. Ryokan continued. Do you carry it often? Kaito sighed. Sometimes. The old monk laughed softly. Sometimes. The traveler knew the answer immediately. Every day. The memory visited every day, sometimes briefly, sometimes for hours. The monk nodded. Heavy. The word lingered. Heavy. The same word people used for his backpack. They continued walking. The trail became steeper. The conversation remained with him. By afternoon, they reached a high ridge overlooking a vast valley. The view was breathtaking. Mountains stretched into the distance. Cloud shadows drifted across forests. Rivers glittered like silver threads. Ryokan sat upon a rock. Kaito sat nearby. The old monk pointed toward the valley. What do you see? The traveler described mountains, trees, villages, water. The monk nodded, then asked, what do you not see? Kaito looked confused. How can I see what I don't see? The old monk smiled. Exactly. The answer felt irritating, yet familiar. Many of the monk's lessons seemed hidden inside simple questions. Eventually, Ryokan explained. You see the valley. Yes, but not every path. True. You see some villages. Yes, but not every home. The monk smiled. Perspective is always incomplete. The lesson seemed unrelated until the old man continued. The same is true of memory. Kaito remained silent. The monk looked toward the horizon. You remember betrayal? Yes. You remember loss? Yes. You remember pain? Yes. The old man nodded. But do you remember everything? The question struck deeply, because the answer was no. The betrayal had become the entire story, yet there had been good years before it, lessons afterward, people who helped him recover, strength he developed because of it. His memory focused almost entirely on the wound, not the whole journey. The realization felt uncomfortable because it challenged a story he had carried for years. That evening, they camped beside a lake. After dinner, Ryokan reached into his small cloth bag. He removed several stones, then placed them on the ground. Kaito looked puzzled. The monk pointed toward one stone. This is resentment. Then another. This is regret. Another. Guilt. Another. Anger. another. Fear. The traveler watched silently. The monk then gathered the stones, placed them inside his cloth bag, and handed it to Kaito. "Carry this." The younger man laughed. The bag felt surprisingly heavy. They walked a short distance. Then another. Then another. After only a few minutes, Kaito became annoyed. "What is the point?" Ryokan smiled. "Heavy?" "Yes." The monk nodded. "Now imagine carrying them for 10 years. The lesson landed immediately, because he already was. The following days continued similarly. Walking, talking, silence, questions, small lessons hidden inside ordinary moments. One afternoon, they crossed a narrow bridge above a Russian river. Halfway across, Kaito noticed a broken section of railing. Instantly, he imagined falling. Injury, disaster, death. His heart raced. The fear felt real, yet nothing happened. They crossed safely. Later, Ryokan asked, "How many times did you cross the bridge?" Kaito frowned. "Once." The monk smiled. "Your body crossed once." The traveler understood immediately. His mind had crossed many times, again and again, imagining every possible outcome, suffering repeatedly. Though the event itself lasted only moments, the pattern appeared everywhere. Past pain, future worry, present fear. The mind carried them constantly, like stones, like weight, like baggage. One evening, while sitting beside a fire, Kaito finally asked, "How do I put them down?" The question emerged quietly, more vulnerable than anything he had asked before. The old monk stared into the flames. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he answered, "First, you must stop calling them treasures." The words hit harder than any lesson so far, because part of him knew it was true. He protected old wounds, defended them, identified with them. The pain had become part of his identity. Who would he be without it? The question frightened him. The fire crackled softly. Night settled around them, and for the first time in many years, Kaito began wondering whether the backpack he carried was heavier than it needed to be. The fire burned low. The mountains stood silent beneath the stars, and Kaito remained awake long after Ryokan had fallen asleep. The old monk's words repeated endlessly inside his mind. "First, you must stop calling them treasures." The sentence irritated him, because it sounded unfair. He did not treasure his pain, did he? He treasured loyalty, justice, memory, lessons, not suffering. Yet the longer he examined the question, the less certain he became. The betrayal from 12 years earlier remained vivid. Every detail, every conversation, every feeling. Why? Why preserve it so carefully? Why revisit it so often? The event itself lasted only a short time, yet he had carried it for more than a decade, like a precious object protected from loss. The realization unsettled him deeply. Near midnight, he finally slept. The next morning, they continued walking. The path wound downward through pine forests. Sunlight filtered through the branches. Birds moved between the trees. The world felt peaceful, yet Kaito's thoughts remained busy. Eventually he asked, "What happens if I let go?" Ryokan smiled. "A good question." The monk walked quietly for several moments, then asked, "What do you fear?" The answer appeared immediately, that it meant nothing. The old monk nodded. The traveler continued, "If I stop carrying the betrayal, if I stop carrying the anger, if I stop carrying the regret, then maybe all that suffering meant nothing." The forest grew quiet around them. Finally, Ryokan spoke. "Does putting down a heavy pack mean the journey never happened?" Kaito looked down. No. Does healing a wound mean the injury never existed? No. The monk smiled. Then why would releasing pain erase its lessons? The question stayed with him. Because he had never separated suffering from wisdom. He assumed letting go meant forgetting. The monk suggested something different. Perhaps the lesson could remain after the pain departed. Like a traveler keeping the map while discarding the stone that came wrapped inside it. That afternoon, they reached a small village. The villagers welcomed travelers warmly. A festival happened to be taking place. Children ran through the streets. Musicians played near the market. Laughter filled the air. The atmosphere felt joyful. Yet one scene caught Kaito's attention. An elderly woman sat beside a food stall. A young child accidentally knocked over her basket of fruit. Apples rolled across the street. Several became damaged. The child froze, terrified. Everyone nearby saw what happened. The old woman looked down, examined the fallen fruit, then smiled. "It's all right." The child stared. Certain punishment would follow. Instead, the woman began gathering apples. The child quickly joined her. Several others helped too. Within minutes, the situation was resolved. The festival continued. Kaito watched thoughtfully. The woman could have become angry. She had every reason. Instead, she chose something else. Later, he mentioned the scene to Ryokan. The monk nodded. "Interesting." "What?" "She dropped the fruit." The traveler frowned. "The child dropped the fruit." The old monk smiled. "Only physically." The answer confused him. The monk continued. "The child dropped apples. The woman could have dropped her piece. She chose not to." The lesson lingered, because he realized how often he had done exactly that. Someone else's actions had occurred years ago, yet he continued dropping his piece every day, again and again, long after the event ended. The following morning, the road entered a narrow canyon. Steep cliffs rose on either side. The air felt cool. Echoes lingered strangely between the rocks. Halfway through the canyon, they encountered another traveler, a man carrying a backpack even larger than Kaito's. The sight seemed almost comical. The stranger struggled visibly. Sweat covered his face. His breathing sounded labored. Every step appeared painful. Eventually, the man stopped, collapsed beside the path, and began unpacking his belongings. The pile seemed endless. Extra cooking pots, duplicate blankets, broken tools, rocks collected from previous journeys, objects with no practical use whatsoever. Kaito stared. The load looked absurd. Why carry all that? The stranger looked genuinely surprised. What if I need it? The answer sounded painfully familiar. The man spent several minutes sorting through his possessions. Eventually, he discarded nearly half of them. The difference was immediate. When he stood again, his posture improved. His face brightened. His movement became easier. The traveler laughed aloud. "I should have done that years ago." After he departed, Ryokan looked toward Kaito. Neither spoke. No words were necessary. The lesson had arrived clearly enough. That evening, they camped beside a river. The water moved steadily toward the sea, never pausing, never clinging, never looking back. While watching the current, Kaito found himself remembering his father. Not the death, not the hospital, not the grief, something else. A fishing trip from childhood, a joke, a smile, a lesson about patience. The memory surprised him. For years, thoughts of his father led almost exclusively toward loss. Now other memories appeared, good ones, warm ones, complete ones. The sadness remained, but it no longer dominated everything else. The realization brought tears to his eyes. Not painful tears, relieved ones. The monk noticed, yet said nothing. Sometimes silence teaches best. Several days later, they reached a mountain pass. The climb proved difficult. Strong winds pushed against them. Loose stones shifted beneath their feet. The journey required effort, real effort. During one particularly steep section, Kaito stopped suddenly. His backpack felt unbearable. Without thinking, he removed it, set it on the ground, and sat beside it. The relief was immediate. His shoulders relaxed. His breathing deepened. His body felt lighter. The sensation lasted only moments, yet it revealed something important. He had forgotten what lightness felt like. The monk sat beside him. After several minutes, Ryokan asked, "How does it feel?" Kaito smiled. "Good." The old man nodded. "What changed?" "The pack." The monk shook his head gently. "No." The traveler frowned. "What do you mean?" "You changed." The wind moved softly around them. The monk continued. "The backpack remained the same. You stopped carrying it." The words settled deeply. Because that was exactly the lesson. The memories existed. The past existed. The experiences existed. The difference was carrying or not carrying. The following week brought rain. Long days of rain. The road became muddy. Travel slowed considerably. One evening, while sheltering beneath a rocky overhang, Kaito finally asked the question he had avoided. "What about guilt?" The monk looked toward him. "What about it?" The traveler stared into the rain. "There are things I regret." The words emerged slowly, painfully. Mistakes, failures, moments he wished he could change. The old monk listened patiently, then asked, "Can guilt repair the past?" "No." "Can it teach?" "Sometimes." The monk nodded. "Then keep the lesson." The traveler looked confused. "And the guilt?" Ryokan smiled. "Why keep the packaging after opening the gift?" The answer stunned him. Because he had spent years confusing the two, he assumed the lesson required the suffering. The monk suggested otherwise. Wisdom could remain, punishment could leave, growth could remain, self-condemnation could leave. The distinction felt revolutionary. Months passed. The journey continued. So did the transformation. Slowly, gradually, like a river shaping stone. No dramatic awakening arrived. No magical moment solved everything. Instead, countless small releases accumulated. A resentment set down. A regret softened. A fear questioned. An old story revised. One stone at a time. One burden at a time. One step at a time. The process felt remarkably similar to unpacking a heavy backpack. Not all at once. Carefully, deliberately, with patience. Eventually, the road led them toward the sea. The journey that began in the mountains approached its end. One evening, they sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Waves crashed below. The horizon stretched endlessly. The setting sun painted the water gold. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Ryokan asked, "How heavy is your backpack?" Kaito smiled. The question carried two meanings now. He removed the pack, lifted it, then laughed. "Lighter." The monk nodded. "Good." The traveler looked toward the ocean. "I thought letting go would erase parts of me." The old monk smiled. "And?" "It didn't." The waves rolled against the shore below. The traveler continued. "I still remember. I still learned. I still care." The monk nodded. "But?" Kaito took a deep breath. "I don't have to carry everything anymore." The old man smiled warmly. "Exactly." The next morning, they reached a crossroads. Their paths separated there. The journey together had ended. Before departing, Kaito bowed deeply. "Thank you." The monk returned the bow. "For what?" The traveler smiled. "For helping me put things down." Ryokan laughed softly. "I didn't put anything down." The old monk pointed toward Kaito. "You did." Then he turned and walked away, slowly disappearing along the road. The traveler watched until he vanished from sight. Then he adjusted his backpack and continued his own journey. Years later, people sometimes ask Kaito why he seemed peaceful. The question always made him smile, because peace had not arrived through acquiring something. It arrived through releasing. The distinction mattered. Most people search for peace by adding more success, more security, more certainty, more control, more answers. Yet many burdens disappear not through addition, through subtraction, through setting down what no longer serves. Old anger, old guilt, old resentment, old stories, old pain. The backpack becomes lighter, not because life becomes easier, because unnecessary weight leaves. And perhaps that is the lesson. Many people travel through life carrying things that no longer belong to them. A criticism spoken 20 years ago, a betrayal from long ago, a mistake that has already taught its lesson, an identity formed during suffering, a fear inherited from another time. The weight becomes familiar, so familiar that we forget it can be set down. The Buddha often taught that suffering persists not merely because painful things happen, but because we continue carrying them long after the moment has passed. The first pain may be unavoidable. The second pain comes from clinging. The traveler and the heavy backpack reveal a simple truth. The journey itself is difficult enough. Life already includes challenges, loss, change, uncertainty. We do not need to add extra weight. Keep the lesson, release the burden. Keep the wisdom, release the suffering. Keep the memory, release the chains. For the road ahead will always contain hills to climb. But those hills become far easier when we stop carrying stones that were never meant to travel forever. And sometimes the greatest freedom is not found in reaching a destination. It is found in finally setting down what we no longer need to carry. As our exploration of Zen Buddhism deepens, let us listen to a story that reveals how true worth is often overlooked. Here starts the next story. There once lived a monk named Sora who knew more than anyone else in his monastery. At least that was what everyone said. And over time, it became what Sora believed as well. The monastery sat high in the northern mountains where the nights were clear and the stars seemed close enough to touch. Travelers often stopped there seeking wisdom. Young monks came to study. Scholars visited to exchange ideas. And whenever difficult questions arose, people usually turned to Sora. He had memorized hundreds of teachings, ancient sutras, commentaries, poems, philosophical debates, historical accounts. If someone quoted a passage incorrectly, Sora corrected them. If someone asked about a teaching, Sora could explain it in detail. His memory was extraordinary, his knowledge vast. People admired him, and secretly, he admired himself. Not in an obvious way. He did not boast loudly. He did not demand praise. His pride was quieter than that, more refined, more difficult to detect. He simply believed he understood more than others. And because he believed this, he stopped listening as carefully as he once had. When younger monks asked questions, he answered before they finished speaking. When elders offered advice, he silently compared it to his own understanding. When visitors shared experiences, he often searched for opportunities to explain rather than learn. Knowledge had become his identity, And identities can become cages, even beautiful ones. One autumn evening, a wandering teacher arrived at the monastery. His name was Master Tenzin. Unlike many scholars, Tenzin carried no books. Unlike many teachers, he spoke very little. His robe was old, his sandals worn, his face weathered by many years of travel. At first, Sora felt disappointed. He expected a renowned master to appear more impressive. Yet the abbot welcomed the visitor warmly, very warmly, which surprised him. For several days, Tenzin remained at the monastery. The monks expected lectures, teachings, formal discussions. None came. Instead, the old teacher helped carry water, swept paths, prepared meals, worked in the garden. The younger monks seemed puzzled, Sora most of all. Finally, after several days, he approached the visitor. "Master," Tenzin smiled. "Yes? I have heard much about you." The old teacher nodded. "I hope not too much." The answer confused him. Sora continued. "People say you are wise." Tenzin laughed softly. "People say many things." The younger monk frowned. The conversation felt strangely difficult, like trying to hold water. Eventually he asked, "What teaching do you consider most important?" The old teacher looked toward the sky. The sun was setting. The first stars were appearing. Then he answered, "The one I am practicing right now." The answer irritated Sora immediately, because it sounded vague, incomplete, unsatisfying. He wanted philosophy, not simplicity. That evening, Sora sat in the library. Books surrounded him. Scrolls lined the walls. Candles flickered softly. The familiar environment brought comfort. Here, he felt secure, certain. Knowledge filled every shelf. The room represented everything he valued. As he studied, one of the younger monks entered. The novice looked nervous. "Brother Sora?" "Yes? I wanted to ask a question." The younger monk hesitated. "What is enlightenment?" Sora smiled. Finally, a proper question. For nearly an hour, he explained. He quoted sutras, referenced historical masters, explained philosophical concepts, described various schools of thought. When he finished, the novice thanked him politely, then left. Several minutes later, Sora happened to pass through the courtyard. There sat the same novice beside Master Tenzin. The younger monk asked the same question. "What is enlightenment?" Tenzin picked up a fallen leaf, held it gently, then asked, "What do you see?" The novice looked carefully. "A leaf." The old teacher smiled. "Good." Several minutes later, the conversation ended. The novice walked away smiling, genuinely smiling. The sight annoyed Sora. How could a simple answer satisfy someone more than an hour of detailed explanation? The question followed him long into the night. The next morning, the monastery awoke before dawn. A clear sky stretched overhead. Thousands of stars filled the darkness. The monks gathered for meditation. Afterward, most returned indoors. Sora remained outside. The stars fascinated him. Astronomy had long been one of his interests. He knew the names of constellations, the movements of planets, the cycles of the moon, the stories attached to each star pattern. As he stood there, Master Tenzin approached. The old teacher looked upward. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Sora nodded. "I know the names of nearly all the visible constellations." The teacher smiled. "I don't." The answer surprised him. "You don't?" "No." Sora frowned. "Why not?" Tenzin continued gazing upward. "I have been too busy looking at them." The sentence lingered. The younger monk wasn't sure why, but something about it felt important. Several days later, the abbot announced an unusual task. A remote mountain shrine needed repairs. Several monks would travel there. The work would take weeks. To Sora's surprise, he was chosen. So was Master Tenzin. The journey began the following morning. The path climbed steadily into the mountains. Forests surrounded them. Streams crossed the trail. Birdsong echoed through the trees. The scenery felt peaceful. Yet Sora spent much of the journey discussing ideas, philosophy, history, scripture, debate. The old teacher listened politely, occasionally smiling, rarely responding. Eventually Sora became frustrated. "Do you disagree?" Tenzin looked surprised. "With what?" "Anything." The teacher laughed softly. "Why must I disagree?" The younger monk sighed. "Because discussion sharpens understanding." The old man nodded. "Sometimes." The answer felt incomplete. Again. Several days into the journey, they reached a mountain lake. The water was perfectly still. Not a ripple disturbed its surface. The monks stopped to rest. While others ate lunch, Tenzin sat beside the water silently. Sora joined him. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, the younger monk pointed toward the reflection. "The lake reflects the mountains perfectly." Tenzin nodded. "Yes." "Why?" The teacher smiled. "Because it is still." The answer arrived so quickly that Sora almost missed it. Then he understood, or thought he did. The mind is like the lake. The old teacher smiled. "Perhaps." The younger monk felt pleased. He recognized the metaphor, understood the symbolism, connected it to familiar teachings. Tenzin looked at him kindly, then asked, "Is your mind still right now?" The question landed unexpectedly, because the answer was no. His mind was analyzing, comparing, interpreting, thinking, constantly thinking. The realization felt uncomfortable. Weeks passed. The repair work continued. The shrine stood on a remote cliff overlooking vast valleys below. The labor was simple: carrying stones, repairing walls, clearing paths. Physical work occupied most of the day. At first, Sora found it frustrating. The tasks seemed intellectually unstimulating. No debates, no books, no complex questions, just work. Yet gradually, something changed. While carrying stones, he carried stones. While repairing walls, he repaired walls. The simplicity became strangely peaceful. For brief moments, thinking ceased. Not because he forced it, because attention became complete. The experience felt unfamiliar and refreshing. One evening, after a long day of work, the monks sat beneath a sky overflowing with stars. The air felt cool. The valley below was silent. The stars seemed endless. Sora found himself studying them automatically, naming constellations, recalling astronomical facts, calculating positions. Then he noticed Tenzin. The old teacher simply looked. No analysis, no categorization, just looking. The younger monk suddenly realized something. For years, he had known about the stars, but he rarely experienced them. The distinction stunned him. Knowledge described reality. Experience touched it. The two were not identical, not even close. The realization continued deepening. The next morning, he noticed birdsong differently, the wind differently, the feeling of sunlight differently. Not because these things changed, because his attention changed. For years, concepts had stood between him and direct experience. Names, definitions, explanations, descriptions, useful things, valuable things, yet incomplete things. The menu was not the meal. The map was not the territory. The word was not the experience. The understanding arrived gradually, like dawn. Several weeks later, the repair work ended. The shrine stood renewed. The monks prepared to return home. Before leaving, Sora climbed alone to a rocky overlook. The view stretched for miles. Mountains, forests, rivers, sky. For a long time, he sat quietly. No analysis, no interpretation, no need to understand everything, just presence. The experience felt simple, yet profound. For the first time in many years, he stopped trying to grasp reality and simply allowed it. During the journey home, Sora walked beside Tenzin. After several hours, he finally spoke. "I think I understand." The old teacher laughed. Dangerous words. The response made him smile. Then Sora continued. "I spent years counting stars." Tenzin nodded. "Yes, but I forgot to look at the sky." The old teacher stopped walking. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Tenzin bowed slightly. The gesture surprised him. "Why are you bowing?" The teacher smiled. "Because you finally answered your own question." Months later, the wandering teacher departed. Life at the monastery returned to normal. Or so it seemed. The library remained. The books remained. The teachings remained. Sora continued studying, continued learning, continued teaching. But something fundamental had changed. Knowledge no longer felt like ownership. It felt like a tool, a guide, a finger pointing toward the moon. Not the moon itself. When younger monks asked questions, he still answered. But more often, he asked questions in return. More often, he encouraged direct experience. More often, he admitted uncertainty. And strangely, the more humble he became, the wiser he seemed. Years later, a novice entered the monastery. Bright, curious, exceptionally intelligent. The young monk reminded everyone of Sora, including Sora himself. One evening, the novice proudly recited dozens of teachings from memory. The performance impressed everyone. Afterward, the novice asked, "Master, what do you think?" Sora smiled warmly, then pointed toward the night sky. Thousands of stars shone above them. "What do you see?" The novice immediately began naming constellations, planets, astronomical patterns. Sora listened patiently, then asked, "And what else?" The novice fell silent. The older monk smiled. The lesson was beginning again, as it always does. And perhaps that is the lesson. Knowledge is valuable. Study is valuable. Learning is valuable. The Buddha himself encouraged investigation, reflection, and understanding. Yet intellectual knowledge has limits. A person can memorize every teaching about compassion and still fail to be compassionate. A person can understand every description of stillness and still possess a restless mind. A person can count every star and never truly experience wonder. The monk who counted the stars reminds us that wisdom requires more than information. It requires direct experience, presence, practice. The Buddha often compared teachings to a raft, useful for crossing a river, but not something to carry forever afterward. Concepts guide us. Experience transforms us. Knowledge points the way. Practice walks the path. For the person who only studies water may remain thirsty. The person who drinks understands something entirely different. And sometimes the greatest wisdom begins the moment we stop counting stars long enough to simply look up and see the sky. Continuing along the path of Zen insight, we pause now to hear a teaching about perception and hidden value. Listen carefully to the next story. Long ago, in a kingdom surrounded by rivers and rice fields, there was a lake unlike any other. From a distance, the lake appeared beautiful. Its waters reflected the sky. White clouds drifted across its surface. Birds nested among the reeds. Travelers often stopped to admire it. Yet anyone who came closer noticed something strange. The water near the shore was dark and muddy. The bottom of the lake was thick with silt. Rotting leaves gathered beneath the surface. The smell was not always pleasant. Many villagers avoided it. Children rarely played near it. Most people preferred the clear streams flowing down from the mountains. Only one thing drew visitors to the lake. Every summer, thousands of lotus flowers bloomed across the water. Their petals were brilliant white and soft pink. Their fragrance drifted through the air. From the muddy depths below emerged some of the most beautiful flowers in the entire kingdom. Among the villagers lived a young woman named Maya. Maya was known for her kindness. She helped elderly neighbors. She cared for injured animals. She shared food with those who had little. Yet despite her gentle nature, she carried a quiet sadness. Years earlier, her father had died unexpectedly. Soon afterward, drought damaged the family's crops. Debt followed. Several close friends moved away. One hardship seemed to arrive after another. Though Maya continued smiling, she often wondered why life felt so difficult. Sometimes she looked at other people and imagined they carried fewer burdens. She assumed they were happier, stronger, luckier. Meanwhile, she felt trapped by circumstances she could not change. One morning, after a particularly difficult week, Maya climbed a hill overlooking the village. There she found an elderly monk sitting beneath a tree. The monk was known throughout the region as Venerable Ketu. People traveled great distances to hear his teachings. Yet whenever someone asked him the secret to happiness, his answer was surprisingly simple. Look carefully. That was often all he said. Maya approached and bowed respectfully. Master, she said, may I ask a question? Of course. She sat beside him. For several moments she searched for the right words. Finally she spoke. Why does suffering seem to follow some people more than others? The monk looked toward the distant lake. Does it? It feels that way. The old monk nodded slowly. And what suffering follows you? Maya hesitated. Then the story poured out. She spoke of grief, loss, disappointment, fear, loneliness, dreams that had never come true. The monk listened without interruption. When she finished, silence settled between them. A gentle breeze moved through the grass. Far below, the lake shimmered in the sunlight. Finally, Venerable Ketu stood. Come with me. They walked down the hillside toward the water. The path wound through fields and groves of trees. Neither spoke. Eventually they reached the edge of the lake. The air smelled of earth and water. Hundreds of lotus flowers floated across the surface. Their petals glowed beneath the afternoon sun. The sight was breathtaking. Maya smiled despite herself. They're beautiful. Yes, said the monk. They continued walking until they reached a narrow wooden dock. The water below was dark. Maya could barely see beneath the surface. The monk pointed downward. What do you see? Mud. And above it, lotus flowers. The old monk nodded. Then he asked a strange question. If the mud disappeared, what would happen to the lotus? Maya frowned. She had never considered such a thing. I suppose there would be no lotus. The monk smiled. Exactly. For a moment she did not understand. Then the old monk continued. Every person loves the flower. No one loves the mud. Yet without the mud, the flower could never exist. They sat together on the dock. Dragonflies drifted across the water. Somewhere nearby, a bird called softly from the reeds. The monk picked up a lotus blossom floating near the edge. People often wish for lives without difficulty. They wish for growth without challenge, wisdom without mistakes, compassion without heartbreak, courage without fear. He held the flower gently. But the lotus does not grow despite the mud. It grows because of the mud. Maya stared at the blossom. Its petals seemed impossibly clean, yet its roots rested deep within darkness. For the first time, she began to understand what the monk was saying. Still, a part of her resisted. "Are you saying suffering is good?" The monk shook his head. "No. Suffering is painful. Loss is painful. Grief is painful." He looked toward the horizon. But pain often becomes the soil from which wisdom grows. The words settled into Maya's heart, yet understanding them fully would take time. The following months brought new challenges. A severe storm damaged several homes in the village. Many families needed help rebuilding. Maya volunteered immediately. Day after day she carried wood, repaired roofs, and delivered food. The work was exhausting. Yet she noticed something surprising. Because she had experienced hardship herself, she understood the fears of those who had lost so much. She knew how loneliness felt. She knew what uncertainty felt like. Her own suffering allowed her to comfort others in ways that simple advice never could. One evening, after helping an elderly widow repair her home, Maya returned to the lake. The lotus flowers were beginning to close for the night. The setting sun painted the water gold. As she watched them, she remembered the monk's words. Perhaps compassion had grown from her grief. Perhaps patience had grown from her struggles. Perhaps strength had grown from difficulties she once wished had never happened. The realization felt both comforting and unsettling. Several years passed. Maya's life slowly improved. The family debt was repaid. The harvests became more reliable. New friendships formed. Yet life remained life. Not every year was easy. Not every season brought happiness. There were still losses. Still disappointments, still moments of uncertainty. The difference was that Maya no longer viewed suffering in the same way. She no longer saw hardship as proof that something was wrong with her life. Instead, she began asking a different question. Whenever difficulty appeared, she would quietly ask, "What might this be teaching me?" Sometimes the answer came quickly. Sometimes it took years, but eventually, every challenge revealed something. One winter, a young man named Nareen arrived in the village. He had recently lost his business. His confidence was shattered. Every conversation revolved around his failure. "I had everything planned," he often said, "and now everything is ruined." The villagers tried encouraging him. Nothing helped. Finally, someone suggested he speak with Maya. By then, she had become known for her calm wisdom. Nareen found her beside the lake one afternoon. The lotus season had ended. Only broad green leaves remained. The water appeared quiet and still. After listening to his story, Maya pointed toward the lake. "What do you see?" The young man looked confused. "Water." "What else?" "Leaves." "What else?" He shrugged. "Mud beneath the surface, I suppose." Maya smiled. Then she told him the story Venerable Ketu had once shared with her. The story of the lotus, the story of mud, the story of growth. When she finished, Nareen sat silently for several minutes. Finally he asked, "So you're saying my failure may not be the end?" Maya looked across the lake. The lotus never curses the mud. It simply grows. Years later, villagers would often bring their children to the lake. They would point toward the flowers and share the lesson. The children listened with fascination, Some understood immediately, most did not. That was natural. Certain truths reveal themselves only through experience. One spring morning, many years after their first meeting, Maya visited Venerable Ketu once again. The monk was very old now. His hair had turned completely white. His movements were slower, yet his eyes still carried the same gentle clarity. Together they walked to the lake. Thousands of lotus blossoms covered the water. The sight was more beautiful than Maya remembered. The monk smiled. "You understand now." It was not a question. Maya nodded. "More than I did before." "And what do you understand?" She looked across the lake. For a long moment she remained silent. Then she answered, "I understand that everyone sees the flower." The monk waited. But few people appreciate the mud. A smile spread across his face. Maya continued, "I spent years wishing my life had been easier. I thought happiness belonged to people who never suffered." She touched one of the lotus petals. "Now I see that much of what is best within me grew from places I once wanted to escape." The monk nodded. Wisdom often arrives quietly, not as a sudden revelation, not as a dramatic moment, but as a gradual understanding born from living. The afternoon sun reflected across the water. The lotus flowers swayed gently in the breeze, and Maya realized something else. The lotus never remains in bloom forever. Eventually its petals fall, its beauty fades, the seasons change. Yet each year it rises again from the same muddy depths, again and again, just as human beings rise after disappointment, after grief, after failure, after loss. Not because life is easy, but because growth often emerges from the very places that seem darkest. And perhaps that is the lesson of the lotus. When we look at our struggles, we often see only mud. We see confusion, pain, fear, disappointment. Yet beneath the surface, something may already be growing. Patience, compassion, humility, wisdom, strength. The flower is not separate from the mud. The flower is born from it. So when difficult seasons arrive, remember the lotus. Remember that what appears dark today may one day nourish something beautiful. And remember that some of the most extraordinary flowers in the world begin their journey hidden beneath the mud. Far beyond the crowded cities and busy trade routes, hidden among rolling hills covered in wild grass and pine trees, there stood an ancient monastery. The monastery was not famous. No kings visited it. No great treasures were stored there. No sacred relics attracted pilgrims from distant lands. In fact, many travelers passed nearby without ever noticing it. Yet among those who knew of its existence, a particular story was often told. The story concerned the monastery's gate. At first glance, the gate appeared ordinary. It was made of dark weathered wood. Time and weather had softened its edges. Vines climbed along the stone walls beside it. Nothing about it seemed unusual, until visitors noticed one curious detail. The gate had no lock. Not now, not ever. For generations, the gate had remained unlocked. Day and night, winter and summer, storm or sunshine. Anyone could enter. Anyone could leave. Many travelers found this strange. Some considered it careless. Others considered it dangerous. The monks never seemed concerned. Whenever visitors asked why the gate remained unlocked, the monks would simply smile and say, "Because freedom cannot be locked." Few people understood what they meant. Among those who did not understand was a young man named Jun. Jun arrived at the monastery during the spring of his 25th year. He carried a small travel bag and a very heavy heart. From the outside, his life appeared successful. His family owned prosperous farmland. His health was good. His future seemed promising. Yet inside, Jun felt trapped. Trapped by expectations. Trapped by fear. Trapped by the endless pressure to become someone important. Since childhood, people had told him what he should become. His parents had expectations. His teachers had expectations. His neighbors had expectations. Even he had expectations. Each year seemed to add another burden, another responsibility, another standard he was supposed to reach. At first, he pursued these goals eagerly, but over time, something changed. The more success he achieved, the less free he felt. Every accomplishment created new pressure. Every victory created new obligations. Every step forward seemed to tighten invisible chains around his life. Eventually, he became exhausted, not physically, spiritually. One evening, after months of inner turmoil, he left home and began wandering. Several weeks later, his journey brought him to the monastery. The first thing he noticed was the gate, or rather, the absence of a lock. He examined it carefully. Surely there had once been one. Yet he found no evidence. The gate simply swung open. A monk sweeping the courtyard noticed his curiosity. "You seem interested in the gate." Jun nodded. "It isn't locked." "No." "Why?" The monk smiled. "You should ask the abbot." Jun was led to a garden behind the main hall. There he met an elderly teacher named Master Renzo. The old monk sat beneath a flowering cherry tree. Petals drifted gently through the air. The scene felt impossibly peaceful. Jun bowed respectfully. Then, almost immediately, he asked, "Why doesn't the monastery have a lock on its gate?" The abbot smiled. "Many people ask that." "And what do you tell them?" Renzo looked toward the entrance. Then he said, "The gate is unlocked because it was never meant to keep people in." Jun frowned. "Most gates are meant to keep people out." "Perhaps." The old monk picked up a fallen blossom. "But some people build gates around themselves." The answer confused him, as many of the abbot's answers would. Over the following weeks, Jun remained at the monastery. At first, he intended only a short stay. Yet something about the place encouraged him to linger. The days followed a simple rhythm. Wake, meditate, work, eat, rest, repeat. Life moved slowly. No one seemed rushed. No one seemed obsessed with achievement. No one appeared concerned with status. For the first time in years, Jun felt space around his thoughts. Yet despite the peaceful environment, his inner struggles remained. Every morning, he compared himself to others. Every evening, he worried about the future. During meditation, his mind replayed old fears. Questions haunted him. What if I fail? What if I disappoint everyone? What if I make the wrong choice? What if I waste my life? One afternoon, while helping repair a stone pathway, he finally confessed these worries to Master Renzo. The old monk listened quietly. Then he asked, "Who is holding you captive?" Jun blinked. "What? Who is holding you captive?" The young man considered the question. "My responsibilities." The monk shook his head. "No." "My obligations?" "No." "My circumstances?" Again the old monk shook his head. Jun grew frustrated. "Then what is it?" The abbot stood slowly. "Come." Together they walked to the monastery gate. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the ground. Birds sang from nearby trees. The gate stood open, exactly as it always had. The old monk pointed toward it. "What do you see?" "A gate." "What else?" "It's open." "Yes." The monk nodded. "Could you leave right now if you wished?" Jun hesitated. "Of course." "Would anyone stop you?" "No." The old monk smiled. "Then why do you speak as though you are imprisoned?" The question struck him deeply. For a moment he had no answer, because the truth was uncomfortable. No one was forcing him to remain. No one was forcing him to pursue certain goals. No one was physically restraining him, yet he still felt trapped. That evening, the question followed him everywhere. Who is holding you captive? The next morning, he noticed something while walking through the village below the monastery. A farmer worked happily in a small field. The man owned very little, yet he seemed content. Later, Jun passed a wealthy merchant. The merchant owned far more than the farmer, yet his face looked tense and worried. The contrast lingered in his mind. Perhaps freedom and circumstances were not the same thing. Months passed. Summer arrived. The hills turned green. Wildflowers bloomed. Jun continued practicing. Gradually, he became more aware of the stories running through his mind. Stories about success, stories about failure, stories about who he was supposed to be, stories about what others expected. For years he had accepted these thoughts as reality. Now he began questioning them. One morning during meditation, a surprising realization appeared. Much of his suffering came not from his actual life, but from his resistance to life. He constantly compared reality to an imagined version of how things should be. The gap between the two created misery. The insight felt both liberating and unsettling, because if he was creating part of his own prison, then he could no longer blame the world. Autumn arrived. Leaves began falling from the trees. One evening, a traveler visited the monastery. The man complained endlessly. His family disappointed him. His neighbors annoyed him. His work frustrated him. His life felt unfair. Jun listened carefully. As the traveler spoke, he recognized something familiar. The man sounded exactly like he once had. After the traveler left, Jun found himself laughing softly. For the first time, he could see the cage. Not a real cage, a mental one. A cage built from expectations, fears, resentments, and attachments. A cage without bars. A cage without walls. A cage maintained entirely by habit. That night he visited Master Renzo. "I think I understand the gate," the old monk smiled. "Do you?" "Partly." The abbot waited. Jun looked toward the entrance visible through the trees. Then he said, "The gate isn't locked because the prison was never outside." The old monk's eyes brightened. "Continue. The prison is inside." The words surprised him even as he spoke them. The fears, the attachments, the beliefs, the stories, the endless need for life to be different. The old monk nodded. "Very good." For a while neither spoke. The evening breeze carried the scent of pine trees through the garden. Finally, Renzo said, "Most people spend their lives trying to change the world so they can feel free." He paused. "The wiser path is discovering the freedom that already exists." Years later, Jun left the monastery. Not because he was unhappy, not because he had failed, but because his time there had come to an end. Before departing, he stood before the gate one final time. The same gate, the same open doorway, the same absence of a lock. Yet everything felt different. When he first arrived, he believed freedom meant escaping obligations, escaping responsibility, escaping difficult circumstances. Now he understood something deeper. Freedom is not the absence of responsibility. Freedom is the absence of inner chains. A person can live in a palace and be imprisoned by fear. A person can live in a small hut and be completely free. Years passed. Jun built a life of his own. He worked, he married, he raised children, he faced challenges, he experienced loss, he experienced joy. Life remained unpredictable, Yet whenever difficulties arose, he remembered the gate, and he asked himself, what am I resisting? What story am I believing? What chain am I carrying that no longer needs to be carried? The questions rarely solved problems immediately, but they often revealed something important. The lock he feared was usually not real. The door was often already open. As an old man, Jun eventually returned to the monastery. The hills looked smaller now, or perhaps he had changed. The gate still stood exactly where it always had. Weathered, simple, unlocked. He smiled, then he walked through it. Not because he needed to enter, but because he finally understood. Freedom was never waiting on the other side of the gate. Freedom was the realization that it had never been locked in the first place. And perhaps that is the lesson. Many people spend years searching for freedom. They search in wealth, in success, in recognition, in distant places. Yet the chains that bind us most tightly are often invisible. Fear, attachment, expectation, the need to control, the need to be approved of, the need for certainty. And like the gate of the monastery, the door out of that prison is often already open. The question is not whether freedom exists. The question is whether we are willing to walk through. For sometimes, the greatest prison has no walls. And the greatest freedom begins the moment we realize the lock was only ever in our mind. As we drift deeper into the still waters of Zen, a quiet teaching begins to rise, one that speaks of clarity and of value not always seen. Listen gently now. The next story begins. Long ago, in a quiet province of green valleys and distant mountains, there was a river that ran beside a small village. The river began high in the snow-covered peaks, where ice melted beneath the spring sun and flowed down through narrow stone channels. From there, it passed through pine forests, open fields, rice paddies, and finally beyond the village toward lands no one there had ever seen. The villagers depended on the river for almost everything. They drank from it. They washed clothes in it. They watered crops with it. Children played along its banks. Old people sat beside it in the evenings, listening to the current move over smooth stones. To the villagers, the river seemed constant. It was always there, always flowing, always reflecting the sky. Yet anyone who looked closely would notice something strange. The river was never truly the same. In spring, it swelled with melted snow. In summer, it glittered beneath the sun. In autumn, red and golden leaves floated across its surface. In winter, mist rose from it like breath. The river remained, and yet it changed every moment. Among the villagers lived a man named Ammon. Ammon loved the river more than anyone. As a child, he had spent countless afternoons sitting near the water with his younger sister, Sari. Together they built small boats from leaves and twigs. They raced them downstream. They laughed whenever one became trapped between stones. They believed those days would last forever, but nothing lasts forever. When Sari was 17, illness came to the village. Many recovered. She did not. Her death changed Ammon. After she was gone, the river no longer felt like joy. It became memory. Every stone, every bend, every sound reminded him of what had been lost. Years passed. Ammon grew into adulthood. He worked in the fields. He married. He raised a son. From the outside, his life continued. But inside, part of him remained beside the river with his sister. He often returned to the place where they had played as children. There, he would sit for hours, staring at the water. Sometimes he imagined hearing her laughter. Sometimes he whispered things he wished he had said. Sometimes he felt anger toward time itself. Why must things change? Why do people leave? Why does life take what we love? One evening, as Emon sat near the river, an elderly monk approached along the bank. His name was Venerable Gyro. He lived in a small hermitage above the village and often walked beside the water at dusk. For many days, he had noticed Emon sitting in the same place, always looking at the same bend in the river, always with the same sadness in his eyes. This evening, Jiro stopped beside him. "May I sit?" Emon nodded. The monk lowered himself onto a flat stone. For a while, neither spoke. The river moved softly before them. Finally, Jiro asked, "What do you see?" Emon looked at the water. "The river." The monk nodded. "The same river you saw yesterday?" "Of course." "The same river you saw as a child?" Emon hesitated. "Yes." Jiro smiled gently. "Look again." Emon frowned. The answer irritated him slightly. He had no patience for riddles. "It is the same river." The old monk dipped his hand into the current. Water moved around his fingers and continued downstream. Then he lifted his hand. "Where is the water I touched?" Emon watched the current. "Gone." "And the water before us now?" "New water." The monk nodded. "So the river remains, but the water changes." Emon said nothing. Jiro continued, "Your sorrow comes partly from loving what has passed." Emon's face tightened. "My sister died. Yes, I cannot simply let that go. I did not ask you to." The old monk's voice was soft. "Letting go does not mean forgetting." Emon looked at him. "Then what does it mean?" Jiro looked toward the river. "It means learning to love without demanding that life stop flowing." The words entered Emon slowly, but they did not comfort him yet. Over the following weeks, the monk and Emon often met beside the river. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they sat in silence. Jiro never told him to stop grieving. He never said sorrow was wrong. Instead, he invited Emon to watch the river carefully, at dawn, at noon, at sunset, after rain, during mist, under moonlight. Gradually, Emon began noticing changes he had ignored for years. The river's color shifted with the sky. Its sound changed with the season. Its depth changed after storms. Its banks changed as roots grew and stones moved. Even the place where he sat was not exactly the same. Grass had spread. A tree branch had fallen. Moss had grown along the stones. Everything was changing. Quietly. Constantly. Without asking permission. One autumn day, Emon's son came to the river with him. The boy was 6 years old. He found several fallen leaves and began placing them in the current. One by one, the leaves floated away. The boy laughed and ran along the bank, trying to follow them. For a moment, Emon felt a sharp ache in his chest. The scene was so much like his childhood with Sari that he could hardly breathe. His first instinct was to look away. The memory hurt too much. But then he remembered Jiro's words, love without demanding that life stop flowing. So he stayed. He watched his son laugh. He let the sadness come. He let the tenderness come too. For the first time in many years, grief and gratitude sat together in his heart. Neither erased the other. Both were true. That evening, Emon told Jiro what had happened. The monk listened. Then he said, "You are beginning to understand the river." Emon looked toward the water. "I still miss her." "Of course. Will that ever stop?" Jiro was quiet for a moment. Then he answered honestly, "Perhaps not completely." Emon lowered his eyes. "But the shape of sorrow can change." The old monk picked up a fallen leaf. At first, grief may feel like a stone blocking the river. He placed the leaf into the water. But with time, it may become part of the current. The leaf drifted away, still present, still real, but moving. Years passed. Ammon continued returning to the river, but slowly, his relationship to it changed. It no longer belonged only to the past. It became part of the present again. He brought his son there. Then, years later, his daughter. He taught them how to make leaf boats. He showed them where the water ran fastest. He told them stories about their Aunt Sari, not with the frozen pain he once carried, but with warmth, with love, with a sadness that had softened into memory. One spring, heavy rains came. The river rose higher than anyone had seen in years. Water flooded several fields. A footbridge washed away. Villagers worked together to protect homes and repair damage. Ammon labored beside them. During the storm, he realized something. The river that nourished the village could also destroy. The river that carried childhood memories could also carry away bridges. The river was not gentle or cruel. It was simply flowing according to causes and conditions. Rainfall, snowmelt, wind, stone, earth, season. Everything shaped it, just as everything shaped human life. Joy, loss, love, fear, aging, change. No single moment stood alone. After the flood, the riverbank looked different. The old sitting place where Ammon had grieved for years was gone. The water had carved away part of the shore. At first, he felt a familiar sadness. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Even the place where he had mourned had changed. Life had not preserved it for him, and perhaps it was not meant to. That evening, he found Jiro at the hermitage. The monk was older now. His steps had slowed. His voice had grown softer. Ammon bowed and said, "The river took my place." Jiro smiled. "And what did it give you?" Ammon thought carefully. "A new bank." The old monk nodded. "Yes. Sometimes the teaching arrived as words, sometimes as water." Years continued passing. Ammon became an elder of the village. Younger people often came to him when they suffered losses. A farmer whose harvest failed. A mother whose child moved away. A young man whose marriage ended. An old woman afraid of death. Ammon never rushed her grief. He never offered easy comfort. Instead, he often walked with them to the river. There he would ask, "Is this the same river as yesterday?" Most answered yes. Then he would ask them to watch. The current, the light, the leaves, the stones, the endless movement. Eventually some would understand. Not immediately, but slowly, the way all deep truths are understood. One evening, a young woman named Mira came to him weeping. Her husband had died unexpectedly. "I cannot bear it," she said. "I want everything to be as it was." Ammon listened quietly. He remembered that feeling, the desperate wish that time could reverse, that life could freeze at the moment before loss. He led her to the river. They sat together at dusk. The water reflected violet clouds. For a long while, Mira cried. Ammon said nothing. When her tears softened, he spoke. "I once thought the river was cruel because it would not stop." Mira looked at him. "Was it?" "No." He watched the current move. "It was teaching me that love must learn how to flow." She did not answer, but her breathing slowed. The river continued. Years later, when Venerable Jiro was nearing death, Ammon visited him daily. The old monk lay near the window of his hermitage, where he could hear the river below. One afternoon, Ammon sat beside him. "I am afraid to lose you," he admitted. Jiro smiled faintly. "Good." Ammon laughed softly through his sadness. "Good. It means you have loved. The old monk's breathing was slow. Do not make grief your enemy. He turned his eyes toward the sound of water. Only do not build a dam around it. A few days later, Jiro passed away. The village mourned him deeply. Emon walked alone to the river. He knelt at the bank and placed a flower into the current. It floated away, just as the leaves had floated away, just as childhood had floated away, just as every moment eventually moved beyond reach. But now Emon did not try to hold it. He bowed, not to death, not to loss, but to the great movement of life. Many seasons passed. Emon grew old. His hair turned white. His hands became thin. His children had children of their own. The village changed. New houses appeared. Old ones disappeared. People were born. People died. Fields shifted. Trees grew and fell. The river remained. And yet, always, it changed. One winter morning, Emon's granddaughter found him sitting by the water. She was a curious child with bright eyes. She sat beside him and asked, "Grandfather, is this the same river you saw when you were little?" Emon smiled. He had once answered that question too quickly. Now he took his time. "Yes," he said, "and no." The child frowned. "That does not make sense." He laughed gently. "No, not at first." Then he dipped his hand into the current. "The river has a name. It has a path. It has banks. In that way, it is the same." He lifted his wet hand. "But the water is always changing. The light is changing. The stones are changing. And we are changing too." His granddaughter watched the river carefully. Then she asked, "Is changing sad?" Emon looked across the water. Sometimes, often, beautifully, painfully, mercifully. But he answered simply, "It can be." Then he added, "But without change, nothing could grow." The girl thought about this. No flowers? No flowers? No babies? No babies? No birthdays? No birthdays? No spring? No spring. She became quiet. Then she nodded as if this was very serious. And perhaps it was. That evening, Emon remained beside the river after she left. The sun lowered behind the mountains. The water turned gold. He thought of Sari, of his parents, of Jiro, of his younger self, of all the versions of life that had appeared, stayed briefly, and moved on. For a long time, he had believed impermanence was only loss. Now he understood it was also possibility. Because things change, wounds can soften. Because things change, children grow. Because things change, sorrow can become wisdom. Because things change, winter becomes spring. Because things change, a grieving young man can become a gentle old one. The river whispered over the stones, never holding the same water, never stopping, never clinging, never refusing its nature. And perhaps that is the lesson. Everything flows. Youth flows into age. Joy flows into memory. Grief flows into understanding. Moments arrive, shine briefly, and pass. We suffer when we demand that the river become a pond, when we try to freeze what was never meant to be frozen, when we ask life to remain unchanged so that our hearts will never ache. But life is movement. The river teaches this without words. It does not keep yesterday's water. It does not mourn the bend it has already passed. It does not rush ahead in fear of the sea. It simply flows. So when change comes, as it always does, remember the river. Let yourself grieve. Let yourself love. Let yourself remember. But do not demand that life stop moving. For the same current that carries things away also carries new things toward us. And if we learn to sit beside it with an open heart, we may discover that impermanence is not only the reason we suffer, It is also the reason healing is possible. With each breath, we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen, where the smallest stone may hold the greatest truth. Here starts the next story. At the edge of a quiet valley stood a mountain so large that it seemed to hold the sky in place. Its peak disappeared into clouds. Its slopes were covered with pine forests, stone paths, and hidden streams. For generations, villagers had lived beneath its shadow. They planted rice in the fields below. They gathered herbs along its lower trails. They told stories about its storms, its caves, and its silence. To them, the mountain was not merely stone. It was a presence, steady, ancient, unmoving. In the village lived a young man named Aaron. Aaron was impatient. He did not think of himself that way. He called himself ambitious, determined, hard-working. But those who knew him well understood the truth. He wanted everything quickly. If he planted seeds, he wanted sprouts the next morning. If he practiced a skill, he wanted mastery within days. If he faced a problem, he wanted it solved immediately. Waiting frustrated him. Slow progress angered him. He admired anything fast. Fast rivers, fast horses, fast traders, fast success. But the mountain annoyed him. Each morning, when he stepped outside his home, there it stood, silent, massive, unchanged. While people hurried, the mountain remained. While seasons moved, the mountain remained. While villagers aged, married, argued, celebrated, and died, the mountain remained. One day, after failing again to master meditation, Aaron stormed out of the monastery hall. He had been sitting for only a short time, but his mind had wandered endlessly. Thoughts came, memories came, plans came, frustration came. Finally, he gave up. Outside, an elderly monk named Venerable Soren was sweeping the stone path. He looked at Aaron and smiled. "Your face is full of weather today." Aaron sighed. "I cannot do it." "Cannot do what?" "Meditate." Soren leaned on his broom. "What happened?" "My mind will not become still." "How long did you sit?" "Almost 1 hour." The old monk nodded. 1 hour. Aaron frowned. That should be enough to feel something. Soren looked toward the mountain. "Do you see that mountain?" "Of course." "Do you think it became a mountain in 1 hour?" Aaron looked annoyed. "That is different." "Is it?" The monk returned to sweeping. Aaron waited for further explanation. None came. Over the following weeks, Aaron continued struggling. He tried meditation, then abandoned it. He tried calligraphy, then grew frustrated. He tried learning herbal medicine, then complained that there were too many plants to remember. He began many things, finished few. Every time progress slowed, he decided the path must be wrong. One afternoon, after another failed attempt at meditation, he went to Soren again. "Master, I need a teaching that works faster." The old monk laughed softly. "Faster than what?" "Faster than this." Soren pointed toward the mountain. "Then go ask the mountain." Aaron stared at him. "The mountain?" "Yes." "What should I ask?" "Ask why it refuses to move." The instructions sounded foolish. But Aaron had learned that Soren's foolish instructions often carried meaning. The next morning, he climbed the lower trail. Mist covered the trees. Birds called from hidden branches. The air smelled of pine and wet stone. After walking for an hour, he reached a large rock overlooking the valley. From there, the village looked small. Smoke rose from rooftops. Fields spread like green squares below. Aaron sat facing the mountain peak. At first, he felt ridiculous. Then, quietly, he asked, "Why do you refuse to move?" The mountain did not answer. Of course. Only wind passed through the trees. Aaron waited. A few minutes. then longer. Soon he became restless. His legs hurt. His thoughts wandered. He stood to leave. Then he remembered why he had come. Impatience. So he sat again. The mountain remained silent. After several hours, he returned to the village with no answer. Soren was still sweeping. "Well?" the monk asked. The mountain said nothing. Soren smiled. "Then perhaps you did not listen long enough." So Aaron returned the next day, and the next, and the next. Each morning, he climbed the trail and sat before the mountain. At first, he hated it. Nothing happened. No visions, no sudden wisdom, no dramatic change. Only sitting, only breathing, only watching clouds move around stone. But slowly, almost without noticing, Aaron began to see things. He saw that the mountain was not as still as he had imagined. Clouds touched it and passed. Rain darkened its rocks. Sunlight changed its colors. Streams moved down its sides. Trees grew from its slopes. Leaves fell. Snow melted. Birds nested. The mountain did not rush. Yet it was not lifeless. It changed slowly, deeply, patiently. One morning, after many weeks, Aaron noticed a tiny pine tree growing from a crack in a rock. It was no taller than his hand. Its roots had found the smallest space. Its needles trembled in the wind. "How long will it take you to become a great tree?" Aaron whispered. The answer came silently. Years, perhaps decades. And yet the tiny pine did not seem troubled. It simply grew. That day, something softened in Aaron. He realized he had been demanding from himself what nature never demanded from trees. Instant growth, instant strength, instant wisdom. He returned to Soren and said, "The mountain does move." The old monk looked pleased. "How?" "Slowly. And so slowly that impatient eyes think it is standing still." Soren smiled. "Good." Aaron continued. "The trees grow slowly. The stones wear away slowly. The paths are formed slowly. Even the streams carve the mountain slowly." The monk nodded. "And what does that teach you?" Aaron was quiet. Then he answered, "That slow change is still change." From that day, his practice changed. Not because meditation became easy. It did not. His mind still wandered. His knees still hurt. Frustration still appeared. But now he stopped expecting 1 hour to transform him. He sat each morning, sometimes peacefully, sometimes restlessly. But he sat, day after day, like water shaping stone, like roots entering rock, like the mountain becoming itself. Years passed. Aaron became calmer, not suddenly, gradually. Others noticed before he did. He interrupted less, listened more, finished tasks he once abandoned. When difficulties appeared, he no longer demanded immediate solutions. He learned to continue. One winter, a landslide blocked the main road to the village. The villagers panicked. They needed the road for trade. Many argued about what to do. Some wanted to abandon the route. Others cursed the mountain. Aaron listened quietly. Then he said, "We clear it one stone at a time." The work took many weeks. Each day, villagers removed rocks, mud, and broken branches. At first, progress seemed invisible, but slowly the path reappeared. One stone, then another, then another. By spring, the road was open. The villagers celebrated. Aaron stood quietly at the edge of the path, looking toward the mountain. He understood now. Great things rarely yield to one dramatic effort. They yield to steady effort repeated. Years later, young students came to Aaron for guidance. Many were like he had once been, impatient, eager, frustrated. They wanted peace quickly, wisdom quickly, success quickly. Whenever they complained, Aaron took them up the mountain trail.
He showed them the tiny pine tree he had once discovered. By then, it had grown taller than a person, still small compared to the ancient trees, but strong, alive, rooted. "This tree is a teacher," Aaron would say. The students often looked confused. "It has never hurried." He would point to the rocks beneath it.
It did not wait for perfect soil. It did not complain about the stone. It simply grew where life placed it. Then he would lead them to the overlook. Together, they would sit facing the mountain. Some students became restless within minutes. Others grew bored. A few became irritated. Aaron would smile. He understood. Then he would say, "The mountain has time to teach those who have time to listen." And perhaps that was the lesson. Patience is not doing nothing. Patience is steady effort without demanding immediate reward. Patience is trusting that small actions matter, even when results are not yet visible. The seed beneath the soil is not failing because we cannot see the sprout. The river is not failing because the canyon takes centuries to form. The meditator is not failing because the mind wanders. The heart is not failing because healing takes time. Some things grow slowly because they are meant to grow deeply. So when the path feels long, remember the mountain. It does not rush. It does not despair. It does not measure itself by one morning or one season. It remains. It receives rain. It receives snow. It receives sunlight. It changes quietly. And over time, even stone is shaped. So continue. One breath, one step, one day, one patient effort at a time. For the mountain that seems unmoving may be changing more deeply than anyone can see. Every autumn, the monastery disappeared beneath a sea of leaves. The temple sat on a hillside surrounded by ancient maple trees. For most of the year, the trees provided shade, beauty, and quiet companionship. But when autumn arrived, they released their leaves by the thousands. Red leaves, gold leaves, orange leaves, brown leaves. They drifted from the branches day after day. They covered the paths, the courtyards, the gardens, the rooftops, the stone steps leading to the meditation hall. No matter how often the monks swept, more leaves appeared. The work never seemed to end. Among the younger monks lived a novice named Jun. Jun disliked sweeping. He disliked many chores, but sweeping occupied a special place in his frustration. To him, the task felt pointless. Every morning he cleared the paths. Every afternoon they were covered again. Every evening, even more leaves arrived. The work produced no lasting result. At least none he could see. Whenever assigned to sweeping duty, Jun sighed dramatically. Sometimes he complained openly. Sometimes only inside his mind. But the dissatisfaction remained. One morning, after spending nearly an hour clearing the central courtyard, a gust of wind scattered fresh leaves across the stones. Jun stared in disbelief. The courtyard looked almost exactly as it had before. His shoulders slumped. "This is ridiculous." An elderly monk standing nearby heard him. His name was Master Ren. He was one of the oldest monks in the monastery, quiet, patient, rarely in a hurry. The old monk smiled. "What is ridiculous?" "The leaves." Master Ren glanced around. "They seem normal enough." Jun groaned. "I just swept all of this." The old monk nodded. "And now there are more." "Exactly." Jun pointed toward the trees. "What's the point?" The old monk considered the question carefully, then answered, "The point of what?" "Sweeping." The old monk smiled. "Perhaps you should find out." The answer irritated Jun. because it sounded like another one of those mysterious teachings monks seem to enjoy. The following morning, Jun resumed sweeping. The leaves remained. His frustration remained too. Yet Master Ren's words lingered. Perhaps you should find out. Several days later, the novice noticed something strange. Whenever he swept, his mind wandered constantly. Sometimes he imagined future conversations. Sometimes he replayed old arguments. Sometimes he worried about mistakes. Sometimes he fantasized about doing something more important. His body swept leaves. His attention existed somewhere else entirely. The realization felt uncomfortable. One afternoon, Master Ren approached while Jun worked. Without saying anything, the old monk picked up a second broom and began sweeping beside him. The two worked silently for several minutes, then 10 minutes, then 20. Finally, Jun noticed something. The old monk moved differently. Each stroke of the broom seemed complete, unhurried, attentive, present. He did not appear bored, nor distracted, nor frustrated. He simply swept. Eventually, Jun asked, "What are you thinking about?" Master Ren smiled. "The leaves." The novice frowned. "Only the leaves?" "At the moment, yes." The answer seemed impossible. No one thought only about leaves. Did they? That evening, June reflected on the conversation. Perhaps the old monk exaggerated. Yet something about his presence felt genuine, peaceful, grounded. The following day, June decided to experiment. Instead of allowing his mind to wander endlessly, he focused on the broom. The sound of bristles moving across stone, the texture of the wooden handle, the movement of his arms, the leaves gathering into small piles. At first, the practice felt strange. His attention constantly drifted away, then returned, then drifted again. The process proved surprisingly difficult, yet also surprisingly interesting. For the first time, he noticed details he had overlooked for years. The shape of individual leaves, the sound of wind moving through branches, the scent of autumn air, the warmth of sunlight touching the courtyard stones. The work itself had not changed. His awareness had. Several weeks later, a traveling merchant visited the monastery. The man arrived exhausted. His business struggled. His family argued constantly. His mind felt overwhelmed. After speaking with several monks, he requested an audience with Master Ren. Jun happened to be sweeping nearby when the conversation occurred. The merchant bowed respectfully. "Master, how do I find peace?" The old monk looked thoughtful, then pointed toward Jun. The novice nearly dropped his broom. The merchant looked confused. "The boy?" Master Ren nodded. "Watch him." The merchant frowned. The novice felt embarrassed. He continued sweeping. Nothing special happened, just sweeping. Eventually, the merchant turned back toward the old monk. "I don't understand." Master Ren smiled. "Neither does he." The answer made even less sense. Yet somehow the merchant laughed. Several days later, he departed looking noticeably lighter. Jun never learned exactly what lesson he received. Years passed. The novice continued practicing mindfulness while sweeping. Not because he became enlightened, not because he suddenly loved chores, because the practice revealed something important. The quality of attention changes experience. When his mind resisted the task, suffering appeared. When his mind wandered constantly, boredom appeared. When he became present, something unexpected happened. The ordinary became interesting, not exciting, not dramatic, simply alive. One winter, heavy snow replaced the autumn leaves. The monastery paths required constant clearing. Many younger monks complained. The work felt endless. Jun, now older and more experienced, understood their frustration. One morning, a novice named Taro approached him. "How do you stay patient?" Jun smiled. "With snow, with all of it." The younger monk gestured broadly. "The chores, the repetition, the same things every day." Jun considered carefully, then asked, "Have you ever eaten a meal?" Taro blinked. "Of course." "And then become hungry again?" "Yes." Jun nodded. "Do you stop eating forever because hunger returns?" The novice laughed. "Of course not." The older monk smiled. "Then why expect sweeping to last forever?" The lesson landed gently. The work still needed doing. The leaves still returned. The snow still returned. Life itself operated this way. One breath, then another. One meal, then another. One day, then another. The repetition was not a flaw. It was reality. Several years later, Master Ren became seriously ill. Age finally began slowing him. The old monk spent more time resting, less time working. One autumn afternoon, Jun visited him. Leaves covered the courtyard outside. The sight brought back countless memories. Master Ren looked toward the window, then smiled. "The leaves seem busy." Jun laughed. "They always are." Silence settled between them. Finally, the older monk asked, "Did you ever discover the point?" Jun immediately knew what he meant. The sweeping, the leaves, the question from years ago. The younger monk smiled. "Yes." Master Ren waited. Jun looked out the window, then answered, "The leaves were never the point." The old monk's eyes brightened. "Go on." "The sweeping wasn't about clearing the courtyard." "Not entirely." The elderly monk nodded. "What was it about?" Jun reflected carefully, then answered, "Being here." The old monk smiled. "Exactly." Several weeks later, Master Ren passed away peacefully. The monastery mourned deeply. The following morning, autumn leaves covered the courtyard. As always, Jun picked up a broom and began sweeping. Not because the leaves would stay gone, they would not. Not because the work would end, it would not. But because the act itself mattered. One sweep, then another, then another. The years continued flowing. Jun eventually became one of the senior monks. Students often approached him with questions about meditation. Many expected complicated answers, advanced techniques, secret teachings. Instead, he frequently handed them a broom. At first, most students felt disappointed, some even annoyed. Yet eventually they discovered what he had learned. Mindfulness is not limited to meditation halls. It exists wherever attention exists. While walking, while eating, while washing dishes, while carrying water, while sweeping leaves. One spring, a visitor asked, "What is the most important practice in Buddhism?" Jun smiled, then looked toward a young novice sweeping the courtyard. The visitor followed his gaze. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, the visitor asked, "That's the answer?" Jun nodded. "If he is truly present, yes." The visitor looked puzzled. The monk smiled, because some lessons require experience, not explanation. And perhaps that is the lesson. Many people spend their lives waiting for important moments, special moments, meaningful moments. Meanwhile, ordinary life passes unnoticed. The meal, the walk, the conversation, the breath, the leaves. The Buddha repeatedly taught that awakening is not hidden in some distant future. It is found in direct experience, here, now, within this moment, whatever it contains. The monk who sweeps leaves mindfully is not merely cleaning a courtyard. He is training attention, cultivating presence, meeting reality directly. The leaves will return. Tasks will repeat. Life will continue unfolding in ordinary ways. Yet hidden within those ordinary moments lies extraordinary depth, if we are willing to notice. So when the mind complains about repetition, remember the leaves. When the task seems small, remember the broom. When life feels ordinary, remember the courtyard. For peace rarely arrives through dramatic events. More often, it appears quietly within the simple things we have stopped noticing. One breath, one step, one sweep at a time. The path of Zen unfolds like morning mist, soft and patient. In this next tale, we are invited to see, beyond appearance, into essence. Listen carefully to the next story. The monastery stood halfway up a mountain where clouds often drifted through the courtyards like silent visitors. It was not a large monastery. No famous teachers lived there. No kings made pilgrimages to its gates. Most travelers passed by without noticing it. Yet those who stayed often left carrying something valuable. Not an object, not a secret teaching, something quieter, a different relationship with ordinary life. Among the monks living there was a man named Ren. Ren had entered the monastery when he was young. Now he was approaching middle age. He was respected by students, trusted by teachers, diligent in his practice. Yet there was one problem. Ren was rarely where he was. His body sat in one place. His mind occupied another. When walking, he thought about arriving. When eating, he thought about work. When working, he thought about rest. When resting, he thought about tomorrow. His attention constantly traveled ahead of him. The habit seemed harmless. Most people lived similarly. Yet it produced a subtle dissatisfaction that followed him everywhere. Nothing ever felt complete. No moment seemed enough, because each moment served mainly as a bridge toward another. Ren rarely noticed this directly. Like a fish unaware of water, he lived inside the habit without seeing it clearly. Then one autumn morning, a traveler arrived. The visitor was an elderly tea master named Jiro. His reputation stretched across several provinces. People spoke of his tea ceremonies with unusual reverence. Some called them art. Others called them meditation. A few called them teachings disguised as tea. The abbot welcomed him warmly. Several monks gathered eagerly, including Ren. At first, the younger monk expected discussions about tea leaves, preparation methods, ceremonial techniques. Instead, Jiro spent much of his first day quietly observing the monastery. He watched monks sweep paths, carry water, prepare meals, meditate. The attention he brought to simple activities felt unusual, as though every action deserved complete respect. That evening, Ren finally asked, "Master Jiro, what makes tea special?" The old man smiled. "Nothing." The answer surprised him. "Nothing. Tea is tea." Ren frowned. The tea master laughed softly. "The special part is attention." The words lingered, though their meaning remained unclear. The following morning, Jiro invited several monks to join him for tea. The gathering took place in a small room overlooking a garden. The space contained almost nothing. A low table, simple cushions, a kettle, tea bowls, silence. The simplicity immediately struck Ren. He expected elaborate decoration. Instead, everything unnecessary seemed absent. The old tea master entered carrying water. Nothing about his movements appeared dramatic, yet everyone watched. Not because he demanded attention, because he gave attention. Every gesture felt complete, intentional, present. The kettle was placed carefully, the bowls arranged carefully, the tea prepared carefully. No movement wasted, no movement rushed. The room grew remarkably quiet. Even the monks noticed. When the tea was finally served, Jiro handed a bowl to Ren. The monk accepted it politely, then immediately raised it toward his lips. "Wait." Ren paused. The old master smiled. "What are you doing?" "Drinking tea." Jiro nodded. "Already?" The monk looked confused. The tea master pointed toward the bowl. "What do you see?" Ren glanced down. "A bowl." "What else?" "Tea." The old man smiled. "Look again." Several moments passed. The monk noticed steam rising gently, tiny patterns on the ceramic surface, the warmth against his hands, subtle fragrance drifting upward, details he almost missed. The tea master nodded. "Now drink." Ren took a sip. The experience felt unexpectedly vivid, not because the tea differed, because his attention differed. Later that day, he approached Jiro privately. "I think I understand." The tea master smiled. "Wonderful." "What?" Ren hesitated, then laughed. "Perhaps I don't understand." The old man laughed too. "A good beginning." They walked slowly through the garden. Autumn leaves drifted from nearby trees. Eventually, Jiro asked, "When you drink tea normally, what else are you doing?" Ren thought carefully. The answer appeared quickly. Planning, remembering, worrying, thinking. The tea master nodded. "Exactly." The older man stopped walking, then pointed toward a leaf falling from a branch. The two watched silently. The leaf turned gently in the air, then landed softly on the ground. Nothing extraordinary occurred, yet the moment felt complete. The tea master smiled. "Most people miss their lives." Ren frowned. "What do you mean?" The old man continued walking. "They are always somewhere else." The lesson disturbed him, not because it seemed incorrect, because it seemed correct. Over the following days, Ren began paying attention to his attention. The results surprised him. While eating breakfast, his mind discussed afternoon tasks. While performing afternoon tasks, his mind imagined evening rest. While resting, his mind reviewed unfinished work. The pattern appeared endless. One moment was rarely enough. The mind constantly reached elsewhere. The realization felt exhausting because it revealed a kind of endless postponement. Life happened now. Attention lived later. One afternoon, Jiro handed him a simple assignment. "Drink 1 cup of tea." Ren smiled. "That's easy." The tea master shook his head. "No." The monk laughed. "Of course it is." "Then do it." The task seemed absurdly simple. Ren prepared tea, sat quietly, lifted the bowl. Immediately thoughts appeared. What comes next? What does this lesson mean? Am I doing it correctly? The tea cooled while his mind wandered. The realization felt humbling. Drinking 1 cup of tea completely required more attention than expected. Far more. Weeks passed. The tea master remained at the monastery. Ren continued learning, not through lectures, through ordinary activities. One morning, Jiro watched him sweeping leaves. After several minutes, the old man asked, "Where are you?" Ren looked around. "The courtyard." The tea master smiled. "Your body is." The monk laughed, because he understood immediately. His thoughts were planning dinner. The broom moved automatically. Attention remained absent. The old man nodded. "Come back." Such a simple instruction, yet surprisingly difficult. Come back. To the broom, to the leaves, to the courtyard, to this moment, again and again. Winter arrived. Snow covered the mountain. The tea master prepared to leave. On his final evening, the monastery gathered for one last tea ceremony. The atmosphere felt bittersweet. The old man had become beloved. When the ceremony ended, Ren approached him. "Master." "Yes? What is the most important thing you taught me?" Jiro smiled, then poured one final cup of tea. Steam rose slowly into the air. The old man pointed toward it. "This." Ren frowned. "The tea?" The tea master shook his head. "This moment." The answer felt simultaneously simple and enormous. Years passed. Jiro eventually died. The monastery continued. Seasons changed. Students arrived. Students departed. Life unfolded. Yet the lesson remained. Ren became a teacher himself. The tea bowl became one of his favorite teaching tools. Students often arrived seeking wisdom, complicated answers, profound insights. Instead, he frequently offered tea. One afternoon, a young novice complained, "My meditation isn't improving." Ren poured tea. The student continued talking. The teacher continued pouring. The bowl filled, then overflowed. Tea spilled across the table. The novice jumped. "Master!" Ren smiled. "Yes? The bowl is full." The teacher nodded. "So is your mind." The student fell silent. The lesson landed immediately. Another year, a merchant visited the monastery. The man possessed wealth, success, influence, yet seemed deeply unhappy. During their conversation, he confessed, "I am always chasing something." Ren nodded. "What happens when you catch it?" The merchant paused. Another goal appeared, another target, another desire. The cycle never ended. The monk poured tea, then asked, "When was the last time you simply drank tea?" The merchant laughed. "What kind of question is that?" The monk smiled. "An important one." As the years continued, Ren noticed something fascinating. The quality of attention changed everything. Eating remained eating. Walking remained walking. Tea remained tea. Yet presence transformed the experience. Not because ordinary things became extraordinary, because they were finally experienced fully. Most people rush through life searching for important moments. Meanwhile, life quietly unfolded inside ordinary ones. A meal, a conversation, a breath, a cup of tea. The wisdom felt endlessly renewable. One spring, Ren climbed the mountain alone. Clouds drifted beneath him. The valley stretched into the distance. He carried a small kettle and a single tea bowl. Nothing else. After reaching a rocky overlook, he prepared tea, slowly, carefully, exactly as Jiro once had. The process felt familiar, comforting, sacred. Not because tea itself was sacred, because attention was. The water boiled, the tea steeped, steam rose, birds sang somewhere below. The wind moved gently through nearby pines. For a while, nothing existed beyond that moment. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, not memory, not anticipation, only tea, only breath, only now. The experience felt profoundly peaceful and profoundly ordinary, both at once. Later that year, a student asked, "Master, how do I find peace?" Ren smiled. The question never changed, generation after generation, the same search, the same longing. He handed the student a cup of tea. The young monk looked confused. Ren gestured toward the bowl. The student stared, waiting. Eventually he asked, "What am I supposed to do?" The teacher smiled. "Drink it." The student frowned. "That's all." Ren nodded. "That is more than enough." The Buddha often taught that suffering arises when the mind abandons direct experience and becomes lost in craving, resistance, memory, or anticipation. We chase future moments, replay past moments, judge present moments, and in doing so, miss life itself. The monk and the cup of tea reveal something beautifully simple. Peace is rarely hidden. It is overlooked, not because it is far away, because it is very close. This breath, this sound, this sip, this step, this conversation, this moment. The mind says, something else matters more. The cup of tea says, be here. The mind says, later. The tea says, now. The mind says, when everything is solved, then I will be peaceful. The tea says, taste this, one sip at a time. And perhaps that is the lesson. Life is not waiting somewhere beyond this moment. It is this moment. The tea grows cold while we think about tomorrow. The conversation ends while we think about the next conversation. The sunset disappears while we plan the next day. Yet whenever we notice, we can return. Again, and again, and again. To the cup, to the breath, to the present. For the person who learns to drink tea completely may eventually discover that peace was never hiding in some distant future. It was quietly waiting in the steam, rising from an ordinary cup all along. In the hush of understanding, Zen offers us another glimpse of what it means to recognize worth not by weight or shine, but by presence. Here starts the next story. The kingdom of Shun was famous for its splendor. Its capital city stretched across a broad river valley. Golden roofs gleamed beneath the sun. Markets overflowed with goods from distant lands. Musicians filled the streets with song. Merchants displayed silks, spices, jewels, and treasures gathered from every corner of the world. Visitors often stood speechless when they first entered the city. Everything seemed larger, brighter, more impressive. At the center of it all stood the royal palace. High walls surrounded elegant gardens. Marble walkways crossed courtyards filled with flowers. Fountains sparkled. Servants moved quietly through the halls. And within those halls lived Prince Ren. Ren was the only son of King Daichi. From the day he was born, people bowed before him. Servants obeyed him. Teachers praised him. Soldiers protected him. Every door opened when he approached. Every room made space for him. The prince never questioned these things. Why would he? They had always been true. He was not cruel, not intentionally. He simply assumed the world was arranged correctly. Kings ruled, servants served, nobles commanded, common people obeyed. The structure seemed natural, like rivers flowing downhill, like seasons changing, like the sun rising each morning. It never occurred to him that reality might look different from another perspective. One spring morning, the king summoned Ren to the throne room. The old king sat quietly upon his chair. Age had softened his movements, but sharpened his understanding. When Ren entered, the king smiled. "Sit." The prince obeyed. For several moments, neither spoke. Then the king asked, "What makes a good ruler?" Ren answered immediately, "Strength." The king nodded. "What else?" "Wisdom." The king nodded again. "What else?" The prince thought. "Authority." The king smiled. "Perhaps." The answer seemed strange. The king rarely said perhaps. Then the old ruler stood. "I have a task for you." The prince straightened immediately. "What task?" The king's eyes twinkled slightly. "I want you to leave the palace." Ren frowned. "For how long?" 30 days. The prince laughed, thinking it was a joke. The king did not laugh. Slowly, the smile disappeared from Ren's face. "You are serious?" "Very," the king continued. "You will travel the kingdom. No royal clothing. No royal guards. No royal titles. You will carry only what you can carry yourself." The prince stared. "Why?" The answer came softly. "Because one day you may rule people you do not understand." 3 days later, Ren departed. He wore simple clothing, carried a small pack, possessed only a few coins. No one bowed, no one saluted, no one opened doors. The experience felt unsettling immediately. The first village he visited barely noticed him. The second treated him as any ordinary traveler. The third charged him for lodging. The prince could hardly believe it. Inside the palace, food appeared automatically. Outside, every meal required effort. Inside the palace, people anticipated his needs. Outside, no one cared. The lesson began immediately, though Ren did not yet recognize it. On the 7th day of his journey, he encountered an old beggar sitting beside a road. The man possessed almost nothing: a worn robe, simple sandals, a wooden bowl. That was all. The beggar sat beneath a tree calmly eating rice from the bowl. To Ren's surprise, he appeared content. The sight seemed impossible. How could someone with so little look so peaceful? Curiosity overcame him. He approached. The old man smiled. "Good afternoon." The prince nodded. "Good afternoon." Then he asked the question directly. "Why are you smiling?" The beggar laughed softly. "Should I not be?" The answer irritated him. Most people would be unhappy living like this. The old man glanced at the bowl, then at the sky, then at the tree providing shade. Perhaps. The conversation might have ended there. Instead, the beggar held out his bowl. "Would you like some rice?" The prince nearly laughed. The man possessed almost nothing, yet he offered to share. The gesture confused him. "No, thank you." The beggar nodded and resumed eating. The encounter lingered in Ren's thoughts long after he departed. Several days later, fate intervened. A storm struck unexpectedly. Heavy rain flooded roads. Strong winds damaged buildings. Travel became dangerous. By evening, Ren found himself stranded in a small village. The only available shelter was a crowded community hall. Farmers, merchants, laborers, travelers. Everyone slept together. The prince felt uncomfortable. Accustomed to privacy, accustomed to comfort, accustomed to space. That night, he barely slept. Yet something interesting happened. The villagers shared everything: food, blankets, stories, laughter. When one family ran short of supplies, another family helped. No one seemed concerned about status, only need. The prince watched carefully. The lesson remained quiet, but it was growing. Several weeks into the journey, Ren arrived in a mountain town. There, he unexpectedly encountered the beggar again. The old man sat near a market. The same bowl rested beside him. The same calm expression filled his face. The prince laughed. "How are you everywhere?" The beggar smiled. "How are you?" The answer surprised him. No one had asked that question sincerely in a long time. People usually asked what he wanted, what he needed, what he commanded, not how he was. The prince sat beside him, something he would never have imagined doing a month earlier. For several hours they talked. The old man spoke little about himself. Instead, he asked questions. Thoughtful questions. Difficult questions. Questions that lingered. Eventually, Ren asked, "Were you always a beggar?" The old man smiled. "No." "What were you before?" "A merchant." The answer shocked him. The man explained. Years earlier, he possessed wealth, property, success, influence. Then a series of misfortunes destroyed everything. At first, he suffered terribly, not because he lost possessions, because he lost identity. Eventually, he discovered something unexpected. Peace remained possible, even without status, even without wealth, even without recognition. The realization changed his life. The prince listened carefully. The story disturbed him because it challenged assumptions he never questioned. Toward the end of the 30 days, Ren visited one final village. The harvest had failed there. Food remained scarce. Many families struggled. Yet despite hardship, the villagers organized a shared meal. Everyone contributed something, even if only a little. An old woman brought vegetables. A farmer contributed rice. A fisherman offered dried fish. Children carried water. The meal was modest, yet the atmosphere felt warm, generous, human. While eating, Ren noticed something remarkable. No one asked who possessed the most. No one demanded special treatment. No one cared about status. The hungry received food. The tired received rest. The sick received care. The simplicity moved him deeply. For the first time, he understood something. Human worth and social status were not the same thing, not even close. On the 30th day, Ren returned to the palace. Servants greeted him. Guards saluted him. Doors opened automatically. Everything appeared unchanged, yet he felt completely different. The king noticed immediately. "You learned something." The prince nodded. "Yes." The old ruler smiled. "What?" Ren remained silent for several moments, then answered, "I met a man with nothing." The king waited. "And he had more peace than many nobles." The king nodded. The prince continued, "I met people who owned almost nothing, yet shared everything." The king nodded again. "And I realized something." The old ruler leaned forward. "What?" The answer came quietly. "A crown does not make a person important." Silence filled the room. Then the king smiled. A genuine smile, the kind only fathers possess. Several months later, Ren requested permission to leave the palace again. The king approved. This time, however, the prince traveled voluntarily. Not because he needed another lesson, because he wished to maintain the one he had already received. Whenever he visited villages, he listened. Whenever he met farmers, he listened. Whenever he met laborers, merchants, fishermen, or travelers, he listened. The habit gradually transformed him into a different kind of leader. Years later, after becoming king, Ren established an unusual tradition. Once each month, he ate among ordinary citizens. No throne, no ceremony, no special treatment. At first, the nobles objected. The king ignored them. Over time, the practice became famous, not because it was dramatic, because it revealed something rare: humility. The people loved him for it, not because he pretended to be one of them, because he genuinely respected them. The difference mattered. Late in life, King Ren visited the roadside tree where he first met the beggar. The old man had long since passed away. Only the tree remained. The king sat beneath it quietly. For a long time he remembered. The bowl, the rice, the offer to share, the lesson. Then he smiled, because the greatest gift the beggar ever offered was not food, it was perspective. And perhaps that is the lesson. The Buddha repeatedly challenged social hierarchies, not through rebellion, through insight. He taught that all beings possess the same fundamental nature, the same capacity for wisdom, the same capacity for suffering, the same capacity for awakening. The prince and the beggar's bowl reminds us that status is not the same as worth. Titles are not the same as character. Wealth is not the same as peace. Power is not the same as wisdom. A person may sit upon a throne and remain deeply lost. Another may sit beside a road with a wooden bowl and possess profound understanding. Humility begins when we recognize this truth. The moment we stop measuring people by position, the moment we start seeing the human being beneath the title. For every crown eventually passes, every fortune eventually changes, every social role eventually ends. But kindness remains kindness, wisdom remains wisdom, compassion remains compassion. And the person who understands this becomes free from one of humanity's oldest illusions, that some lives matter more than others. For beneath every crown and beneath every beggar's robe beats the same human heart. As the lantern of awareness glows a little brighter, we come to a tale about seeing with more than the eyes. Let the stillness guide you now, and listen carefully to the next story.